everyone. Welcome to Avocado Gamescast, episode 103. I'm your host, Merve. Today, we're going to be talking all about our favorite so-called 6 out of 10 and 7 out of 10 games. You can't see my fingers doing this, but I'm doing air quotes right now. I don't mean games with like literal open critic scores between 60 and 70. We're not talking about review scores today, really. But what we're talking about are flawed or only okay games that we enjoy a lot nonetheless. But before we get to all that, let me introduce the fine folks who are joining me today. Her favorite T-test is an oolong exam. It's Thoughts.
Hello.
He'll ask a Koopa to do a barrel roll. It's Wolfman Jew.
Harumph.
And finally, for him being bravely default is intentionally using one of the original skins in Fortnite, it's the Kappa.
I'm like one of the few bravely default defenders too. I want to point that out. I think for a long time I think it's getting a re-look now that it's kind of wrapped. But I actually really like that series, man. You liked it too, right?
I've never played it. I should rectify that. The JRPG I'm playing right now is Aiden Chronicle, which is not the game that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit. But how's everyone doing?
Good.
We're
Wild
recording
day.
this. Yeah, just so we're not going to talk about the events of the day probably, but just to let it all in the open, we're recording this on the afternoon to evening of July 21st.
It's been a big day for Aaron Sorkin. Let's just leave it at that.
I take it back.
I just also want to point out, and I feel like I've actually been hitting this bell a lot in the politics thread on the Avocado, but like, this isn't even the first time he's done this.
Yeah.
He did the same thing in 2016.
Yeah, I think he's like you know how we read literature that's like magical realism, and it's like, oh, wouldn't this be nice? I feel like he writes it, and it's like, yeah, maybe this will happen. Like it's like fanfic to him. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's not really serious. It's very odd.
I guess the first season of The Newsroom is kind of that, like...
Yeah.
Oh,
this
yeah.
Is how
Very
I would,
much, yeah.
Here's how I would explain this news story. Oh, dear God. If he ever writes a movie about the games industry... Christ.
I can't imagine he would, because I can't imagine that he has enough respect for the games industry to do that. And I say this as probably one of the bigger Aaron Sorkin, like, quote-unquote fans on the Avocado. No.
I think his attitudes towards video games would probably be described as Ebertian.
Yeah, and that's always been hard for me to suck down. You know, I love Ebert, right? He's maybe one of my favorite like movie reviewers ever. But for him to just like, nah, it's all trash. You know, like
It's to me, it's like, it's whatever. It's...
Yeah.
I think it's probably a bit silly of him, but the degree to which the games industry, or maybe the games fandom and community, like, got so up in arms was, I think, more telling than just an old guy who's not really interested in a form of art.
yeah, I think there's a little bit of like with his like stance, he didn't want to be swayed, and a lot of people were trying to do exactly that. You know what I mean? And it just wasn't going to ever get anywhere. It's telling a rock to be a tree or something. You know, he just wasn't going to hear it. And I just kept reading all these indefenses and what about this game? What about that game? It's just like you're just never just let it go. You know,
if you want to be okay, not to get the Avocado local critic thing out of the way, but if you're interested in being a critic, you should do it for its own sake. Mm-hmm. For the sake of the medium you're reviewing. Like, otherwise it's just fundamentally like you're not focusing on what makes criticism in an ideal world really good.
I think this is an idea that was very like often espoused on the old Gameological site by John Tatey and Anthony John Agnello. And their attitude was like, instead of debating about whether or not video games are art, just treat them like art and comment on them like art, and then
Yeah.
everything will follow from there. And that's the attitude that I've tried to adopt on this podcast and in my discussions about video game more broadly. And speaking about video games, let's get right into it. Let's just talk about what we've been playing lately. I had a whole spiel. I was going to do like a whole banter spiel about like my new blender and the milkshake I just made in it that I'm drinking right now. But you guys don't care about my new blender, so let's talk about video games. What have y'all been playing lately? Kappa, what have you been up to on your clickety-clacky keyboard or your controller, whatever you're playing with these days?
I wish I had a cooler game to talk about, but I got back into Might and Magic Hero 7.
Nice.
Which, I don't know why. I think I was like digging through my Ubisoft Connect, and I think I got it on some sale or something. Never played it, and I remember 6 being such a shit show, right? There was a bunch of games. I think it like I can't remember what Ubisoft was doing at the time. I think it was like HOM 6 and like Settler 7 came out around the same time, and they were trying to do this really weird like persistent online thing with them where like you build a castle. I don't know if you played the Settlers at that time, but in HOM 6 they were doing this like you build a dynasty and you unlock these weapons and they can be used by all these different heroes and stuff.
Like
and I
kind of
checked that.
Fire Emblem or Massive Chalice in that way, like you have these dynasties, or what are they trying to accomplish?
I don't know, because I think they were pushing the online modes a little bit more at the time.
Oh yeah.
And like that's not really what I've ever played one of those games for, so I kind of just immediately didn't get into it, right? So I think I kind of wrote off HOM 7 ahead of time before really giving it a fair chance. But man, it is all there in all its hommy goodness in a lot of ways. Kind of feel like this one plays a lot faster. It skips those like, it's got like more of a beginning, middle, and end game, I think, than a lot of other HOMs miss out on, where like you just spend entire months sitting in your castle building up creature stacks. This one I feel like it rewards you a little bit for rushing the computer, and it also kind of prevents you from getting steamrolled by cheap ass computer tactics of like they starting with a lot more shit than you do. So it feels way more fair to me than HOM 6 did, which is another reason I kind of jumped out of it. And so I was like, kind of like reignited for my HOM love. And I went to go jump into it, and I'm not sure. You probably don't know, but do you know how much Ubisoft Plus Premium costs for a month?
I remember it was something ridiculous for a while. I believe it was almost as expensive as Game Pass.
It's $19 a month.
That is literally $1 less than Game Pass Ultimate.
Wild to me, right?
Also, Game Pass Ultimate has Ubisoft games.
Yeah, it has it tied into it.
I bought myself 3 months of Game Pass for an experiment next year, and like assuming that they don't take down those games, I'll probably play one of the Assassin's Creeds.
Yeah, so I think what Game Pass has tied into it, I think, is like the back catalog tier of Ubisoft Plus, but they're trying to really sell. Like, if you want to buy the day one or whatever it is, I think it's like $18.99 or $17.99. I can't remember what the plan was. I think I was looking at maybe like the yearly one, so I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like $180 a year, which is fucking crazy.
It's nuts.
So I was like, I don't mind getting these subscriptions. I've got a whole bunch of them now. You know what I mean? So I was like, so I kind of like went down my queue, and I was like, I just don't know if that's worth it. But anyway, I'm really liking HOM 7. I don't know, like the HOM series kind of feels like it definitely would be the type of game series we talk about in a 7 out of 10 series, type game. But I think it's a really interesting one where if you like that style of play, there's not really a lot of. I think there was one that was called like King's Bounty, that was kind of popular for a while. But there's not really a lot of imitators in that genre. It's pretty much just HOM and that's it, right? I can't think of many other games that really do that kind of 2D, 3D, monster stacks, roaming an open world map, racing the competition type stuff. But yeah, it's been around as a series, since the beginning pretty much, so.
Yeah, it's a really old one.
Yeah, kind of interesting. It hasn't had any like real competition, but I don't know. I mean, I jump in. I play. I'm a necro, by the way. You know, that's my faction because I just love like
You love
like
death.
yeah, that too. But, like I like barely winning a battle and then like being like, oh fuck it, they're all skeletons now. Who cares? Like you just raise, you know, the entire enemy army as a stack of skeletons. You just kind of keep moving on. Like yeah, it kind of like boosts your morale. Like when you have a real tough battle and you kind of eat it, it's like, ah, well, more skeletons for the fire, I guess. But yeah, I like Necro as a faction.
Yeah. You mentioned Ubisoft earlier, and it's really interesting to me that Ubisoft has so many strategy franchises. They have this, they have Anno, they have Settlers.
Siege.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, Siege. They have a lot, right? And then on top of that, they also do the Mario Rabbids games. If you want, like, if you could
They
count
kind of
tactical
just
strategy.
shit out
Hey,
that Settlers
Mario-
game so unceremoniously this year or last year. I don't know what
The
it was.
Settlers was last year, I believe.
Oh, oof.
Or the year before. You know what? It doesn't matter because nobody played it.
I think they even forgot that they.
Yep.
To be honest.
And I just find it so funny that they have all these franchises, and aside from maybe Anno, don't seem to know what to do with them.
Yeah.
Like, and they're all very distinct franchises with very distinct kind of flavors of strategy.
I think Ubisoft is kind of one of the things that defines it is that lack of really knowing what to do with things. Like it's like series that don't seem to gel with what they're trying to make, or I don't know, making a game for 20 years that may come out in 2 years or never.
Yeah.
Or
You know, the funny thing is, I don't know whether you're talking about Beyond Good and Evil 2 or the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake.
no, you know. The I was also thinking about the like, and I know you've definitely heard me talk about this, Merv, but like the last year Netflix and the guy who produces the Castlevania show made a Ubisoft crossover show that's
Yeah.
like set in a dystopia.
It's
and
Adi Shankar, right?
Yes, and it's very bad. I should be clear. Like, it's a crossover, but it's a really weird crossover because the only good characters are the assassin from Assassin's Creed, except he's a frog, and Rayman, who is not a lovable, like, cartoon guy who just goes around in a hoodie, but actually a coked out propagandist who, like, snorts coke off the back of a naked cow lady.
So this sounds like The Boys.
Yeah.
It's the best way I would describe it is if like some like drugged out executive decided that like the best way to do like a Super Smash Brothers-esque crossover, like corporate crossover, would be to make it like The Boys. Jade and Paige from Beyond Good and Evil are in it. Jade gets killed like in her first episode, and Paige gets killed in its second. It's fucking terrible. And it turns out that the whole villain is Sarah Fisher from Rainbow Six, who is also a Templar and also a robot spider.
Jeez.
I can't tell whether this is terrible or amazing.
No. It's I've seen it. It's terrible. It's like it sounds funny to be like, oh, ha ha ha, like the bad guy from Far Cry 4 is here, like Pagan Min, but no,
Yeah,
it's
Pagan Min.
but as in really unfortunately gay coded like caricature. It's really bad. Oh, it's
Oh god,
like
I mean, he is kind of gay coded in Far Cry 4, but not like flamboyantly so. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But
he's yeah. Also, the Rainbow Six are like Sentai. Anyway, my point
wait,
is
what? Okay, no, that requires some unpacking. The Rainbow Six, they're like the colors of the rainbow, like Power Rangers.
yes, they're called the Neji Six. That's their version of Rainbow Six, and they are like Adi plays the lead one, and they're racist against Rayman because he comes in from the dimension they fight. And anyway, I don't really mean to derail. I promise this is not an attempt to derail this, everyone. My point here is that it really like it comes across as like all from Adi's mind, but like what such as it is. But Ubisoft themselves really seem to struggle at like figuring out a corporate identity for what they mean and what for their games mean. And I mean, like they currently have a live service shooter that is a Ubisoft crossover.
And it's actually kind of a hit
X
right
Defiant.
now. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Actually,
yeah,
not
it's
a
been well
couple
received
nowhere,
from
kinda.
what I understand.
But I think the thing about that I'm finding most about like going back through their back catalog and stuff is like if they, like Anno is a good example. I feel like they figured out how to cash in on Anno. If you look at the number of like packs that have been sold for Anno, there's 10 million different little like theme packs and treasure hunts and this and that. I feel like they've struggled to monetize their microtransactions in a way that a lot of other studios haven't, because so many of their games are kind of singular experiences, right? Where like if you want to add more to Valhalla, which is already the longest game ever created, I think, you're doing like full-on DLCs and they're selling like horse packs and stuff like that. But I feel like they want those little nickel and dime type microtransactions that they can pump out for Anno, and they just haven't worked kind of anywhere else. They can't figure out how to do that with Hom. They can't figure out how to do that with Settlers and a lot of the other games. And it feels like that if they can't figure it out, they just kind of let it die by the wayside while they pump the cash cows. I feel like Beyond Good and Evil is probably another good example, because remember they were trying to do that weird tie-in with Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah, and his like
Yes.
media company.
Oh right, yeah.
I feel like that was going to be an entrance to like a, hey businesses, wouldn't it be funny if we stuck a ad for Burger King in Beyond Good and Evil, you know what I mean, or something like that. And I feel like that part never really materialized. And I wonder if there's a little bit more behind the scenes with contracts and stuff about why that game still hasn't seen the light of day and that angle of it, because I'm wondering if it was some kind of subsidy thing. Because I remember, Merv, you pointed this out when they announced this way back when about that, is one of the things about that whole company that Joseph Gordon-Levitt was, pushing was if you submit something to him, he owns it, right?
Yeah.
And then they're going to put it in the game, but maybe you get credit, maybe you don't. But if you create an ad for Wendy's, you're basically doing free labor for Wendy's to stick their ad in the game,
My guess was the model they were trying to follow was not so much courting corporate ads, because that's a whole other like ball game. My guess is that they were trying to do something more like Bethesda Creation Club kind of stuff, where you submit stuff and then maybe you get like a kickback through Joseph Gordon-Levitt's company, then Joseph Gordon-Levitt's company takes a cut, and then like they handle kind of the advertising side of this, and then Ubisoft makes money off selling these things as like mods or like skins that creators can add to their game. Like that's what I kind of had in mind, but like it's possible they're trying to go the corporate route. I don't really know what they're doing.
Is there money in making a free ad for a fake company in a game? Like,
oh no, but there'd be money in like, making a new skin for Paige, or like a new ship model you can fly around, that kind of thing.
I don't know why I kind of thought it was more tied to the game world, like in forms of like videos and ads, and like because he was really pumping that creative aspect of it a little bit more than just mods. So I don't know. Maybe I'll go back and watch that, but that game's never going to come out, so who cares? Sorry, get that one out of the way. But no, Hom 7, back to it. This is a good thing. I think we talked about this before. I've always kind of got some games like to scratch an itch. And it's interesting how many times I've come back to the Hom series because there's nothing else like it. There's nothing else that's like, man, I can't wait for Week of the Griffin to kind of, drop in on, the old Griffins and destroy them or something. But as a series, I'm just more surprised, I guess, that there's never really been anything that has kind of done except for that King's Bounty. Maybe it's not as popular as I think, but there's been 7 of them, so
I mean, someone's playing them.
Yeah,
They keep making
someone's
them,
buying them. I mean, but yeah, Hom 7, blast from the past.
For sure. Thoughts? What have you been playing?
I feel like my answer is very boring because I'm doing a Dark Urge run of Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but having a real hard time because I like all the characters. Well, no, I don't. I have a hard time making myself do evil things. I just want to do the like normal run things, but I did cut off Gale's hand.
Yes. All right, you're on the right path then.
Um,
I am a noted Dark Urge fan. I feel like it's the canonical playthrough, and I don't like to resist everything. I like to dabble. I like to kind
The
of
way I
feel
see
things
it,
out.
Gale has too many hands.
Yeah.
he does have too many hands, and it turns out that if he fails to join your party, you can just turn Will into a wizard.
Basically,
And
yeah.
yeah. Because I'm not a big fan of warlocks as a class anyway. But yeah, I'm trying to like give in sometimes, not give in sometimes. I'm also trying to romance Karlach, so it's a little bit of give and take. Because you can't be too evil.
One of the things, yeah, there's a lot of drawbacks on that full evil Dark Urge playback. I've struggled with it. I don't feel like it's as rewarding of a game, and it makes you make so many like decisions based on like, well, if I do this, like, if you don't save the Tiefling camp, you lose so much and you gain
really
so
do.
little. It's hard for me to be like, okay, yeah, I'm good with losing Will, Karlach. You know what I mean? Like, who else? I think you lose somebody else. I can't remember else. In order to get Minthar, it's not a good trade-off. You know?
Yeah. Apparently you can get Minthara if you knock her out anyway, which I didn't
Yeah.
do. I'm also just having fun. The first time through, I did a Tav run, and honestly, it's just fun because the first time through, I missed a lot of subplots. So even if I'm being a little bit evil, it's fun to just find new parts of the game that I wasn't aware of or didn't get to do the first time through.
The Dark Urge, I think, is a really eye-opening playthrough to see all the stuff that they planned for. Like, if you do things certain ways, it's kind of eye-opening. Like, oh, wow, they actually considered what if the player does this. It does that a lot more than a Tav run that I think is a little more on rails, you know?
Yeah.
But the Dark Urge is very like, what if I just kill Lizelle right as soon as I meet her? Oh, yeah, you can do that. And, like, the game goes on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that, like, my idea with my Dark Urge was like, if I'm not going to use that person in my party, I'm going to kill them. You know, like, if I just don't have a spot for them, right? So I killed Lizelle. Because my Dark Urge was going to be my warrior, so I just didn't have a warrior slot, and I just didn't want her sitting around at camp. You know, so I was like, yeah, I'm just going to kill her and see what happens. Oh, and the game accommodated it. It was very odd in certain points, especially after you've done a Tav and you know how things go. It's kind of like, wow, okay, I can't believe they wrote a way around that. You know, you go to the Creche, it's still there. But
yeah. Well, you end up almost definitely fighting boss. I think.
Yep.
If you don't. Have
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. And there's a lot of stuff later on where it's just like there's not an option for a certain ending. If you don't have a Lizelle around, I think you could probably still game it. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, but if you look deep enough, but Dark Urge is like, I think it's the highlight of really like the writing in that game too. There's a lot of really well written stuff. If you resist, especially like if you resist and romance Shadowheart, I think there's a lot of like parallels to your stories that kind of really highlights that game. So I can't wait to see what happens when you finish it, because
Folks have really been, like, for such a long game, a surprising number of people are doing multiple playthroughs.
Yeah.
It's really been interesting to see how much this game engenders, like, people wanting to see the opposite decisions of what they made the first time through.
So, Thoughts, what are you thinking about doing with the Bard? That's the big question.
I think
Muted?
her mic died. Or maybe she's muted. Maybe the internet died. Who knows?
Yeah.
Oh, my
Cyber?
mic switched again.
Oh,
For
it's okay.
some reason, it just switched on me.
That's fine.
I kind of thought, because I started talking about things and you guys were like, just didn't notice.
No, sorry. We're not that
We like to talk
evil.
over our guest here at the game.
Yeah. No, so I'm actually past the Bard.
Oh, okay.
You're talking about Alfira,
Yeah.
I assume. And I I have not been like looking ahead for the things, the choices that come up, because one of my things with this playthrough is like I'm willing to game out battles. Like I'll restart a battle 5 times to get the right spot, but I'm trying not to game out the like interpersonal stuff.
Good.
So,
Yeah.
So I had no idea what was going on with Alfira, and I super murdered her.
Yes. All right.
But then I just told everybody about it.
That is one of the coolest. A lot of people game that because they just can't. And I'm like, it's so defining of the Dark Urge, right? Like what you do after that moment. A lot of people game that and knock her out, and then a random bard comes in the camp. But like, I like it. I think it's well written, and you're like, you can either like basically gaslight your companions. You can lie about it. Or you can be like, oh shit, I'm messed up. You guys got to help me.
And one of the things that I was saying when my mic was up, one of the really interesting things for me about Baldur's Gate, in terms of like how they do the companion stories, is you were saying there's a lot of parallels with Shadowheart, and totally there are. But I think if you're playing as Dark Urge, you have a lot of parallels with everybody, and you can sort of play into that depending on who you end up kind of gravitating towards. And so one of the reasons I sort of chose to go with Karlach is I wanted to give myself a sort of in-universe reason to resist. But you still manage to have a lot of these, like, it's not like Karlach has no deep, violent urges. She very much does. She's just like a good person.
Which is interesting because like it kind of like it felt like Astarion pushed me away for almost the exact opposite reason. You know what I mean? He's like, I just want to be super powerful. I'm like, yeah, yes, you want to, break the curse and all that, but he lets the mask drop a couple times, and I'm sitting here trying to resist my, and I'm like, hey, he should probably do the same, and he doesn't like that.
What if you were cool like me? Yeah, I romanced Astarion in my first run, which was why I ended up having to game so much of the interpersonal stuff in the first run, because Astarion's impossible to romance. But it's been really interesting, actually, because a lot of the things I'm doing in this run, Astarion fucking hates.
Yeah, he hates the Dark Urge. And you're like, you're trying to do the same thing I already am. And it can be kind of frustrating. Like, just get in line, dude. Like, we're all screwed up here. This whole party's full of weirdos.
An element of projection and self-loathing there, or what do you think?
Well, yeah, definitely with him. I mean, because he wants to couch his I want to be free with I want ultimate power. Whereas if you're the Dark Urge, you're like, I don't want this ultimate power because it comes at like a terrible cost. He's willing to accept the terrible cost part, and he doesn't really care. The rest is kind of like subterfuge, especially if you're romancing him. It kind of comes out a little bit more, Yeah. He has no problem basically using you to get his means. If at the end, he gets what he wants, and he'll burn Tab pretty easily. That's a hard romance because along the way he's just kind of like, yeah, this isn't for real. You know that, right?
Well, luckily I was playing Tab as a folk hero, so she was just the goodiest goody two shoes.
Oh,
so
okay.
anytime we came up on anything, I was like, just don't worry, I sincerely care about you, which totally off-puts him. He cannot handle it. Whereas with Karlach, I'm taking a much more like, well, that's the thing, Karlach's so easy. You're just like, yeah, I'm really into you. And she's like, yeah, that's great.
It's a very like teenager-y kind of love with her. Like, it's like, just hang out with me. That's all I want. Good, bad, whatever, Yeah.
Well, like this is truly, I had to restart the party scene. I had to restart 3 times to get Astarion's romance, which I now know why, because he's using you, and so you have to play disinterested so that he goes after you.
Right.
Whereas with Karlach, I literally just went up and was like, hey, so I've been meaning to tell you I really like you. And she's like, oh, that's awesome. I mean, just the difference between those two paths is...
Yeah, coming from, like, I think more of, like, a Dragon Age romance type, world or whatever, I thought I was going to have to work a lot harder on some of those romances. So it kind of felt like a trap when, like, I played at launch, and that was before the patch where it's like, hey, maybe companions shouldn't just throw themselves at you the second they meet. No, really, that was like I think very like one of the first patches because people were like, this is kind of weird. Like I just met Halson, he's like, hey, you want to go have bear sex in the tent? If not, it's cool. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Like it
But
felt
that is
weird.
a very Halson thing, though.
Yeah.
Like, if any of them are gonna do that, it's
But
Halson.
like I think the second time I went to camp, Gale did his whole like, oh hey, me and Agatas broke up, so you want to do magic together that leads to hooking up? And it felt so weird. I was like, dude, I just met you. I didn't say no, but I was like, okay, like 'cause a lot of times in video games you're used to like locking yourself into a romance, right? Like, and then it shuts off other ones. So I was really kind of like not recognizing that me saying no early on was not just locking me out of theirs, it was locking me out of other ones. And that was more of a bug that I think got patched as the game went on. But yeah, I got to the end of the game and basically like was all by myself because everybody kind of blew me off because I didn't say yes the second I met them. But yeah, I mean, Dark Urge, it's hard for me not to imagine that that wasn't the original like way the game was written instead of Tav. I wonder if they just like found a lot of people. I think it's hard for people to commit to evil runs. Just honestly, so many people say exactly that. Like, I just couldn't commit to being evil. You know?
Here's the thing, like, there's a certain like, oh, you're playing The Sims, let's lock all the Sims in the room and watch them die, which obviously everybody who's ever played The Sims has done.
Deleting ladders off the pool.
You delete ladders off the pool. But I do think like when you're in a story to a degree, a lot of people like it's not as fun to be evil as it like seems like it will be if there are consequences.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you really have to the whole point of a game like Baldur's Gate is to a certain extent to engage in the emotions of the story and engage in those relationships, and most people don't like being mean to other people.
Yeah. And I think especially in Baldur's Gate it's tough because my biggest knock on it is that the evil experience is not equal to the good experience, right?
No, yeah.
It's very much cutting away huge parts of the game to play that stuff, which I get. I mean, you're going to push people away, but you don't get rewarded for it in other ways. It's very much like, well, you just closed off this path or this part of the game.
I think this is just like a fundamental issue of a lot of RPGs, in anything that has like is invested in some kind of like moral choice system or some kind of like sense of examining the morality, or like where your options are based on different kinds of morality instead of different kinds of like strategies, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like in Mass Effect 1, doing renegade, anything that is renegade, is absurd. Like literally almost every renegade option you have is like either reprehensible or just feels completely out of character. Later entries were a little bit better because they generally presented it less as, is Shepard your generic like science fiction action hero, or is your Shepard like just inexplicably like a jerk, versus you have to, where it's instead couches it as, here are options you may have to do, rather than going out of your way to be a jerk.
It becomes more like compassionate versus pragmatic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you use this play style, and so you go this way, versus you make this decision and it goes this way. Feels very different.
And I will say, in Baldur's Gate, for instance, some of the early on decisions that you have to make for like an evil run, they give you pragmatic reasons to do the good thing anyway. Like going and saving the tieflings, you can just decide to do it because you want to get to somebody who you think can cure you. So if you're taking the evil run option there, you really have to just be committing to, oh no, I just like murdering people.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
With little upside at all.
Yeah. Which of course they give you an in-story reason why you might, but it does make it harder to sort of take that path.
That's true. Like, you do see a lot of... How do I put this? I think sometimes, like, we forget that evil options are actually, or amoral options are actually impractical in a lot of contexts. Like, you do have to go out of your way to be a dick, and sometimes it's both easier and feels nicer to just be nice. And sometimes I think it's the right thing to do for video games to reflect that. But other times I think, this is a video game, and, like, I'm not evil in real life. This is just a fantasy. Let me just act out the fantasy, right?
I think
one of the the things I always think most about is like any RPG, like you get sufficiently strong, you're known around the world, you've slayed a few gods, things like that, right? And then like you get to the new village that you haven't been in more, and people are like, hey, can you help me find my 7 lost chickens that are wandering around the barn? Like there's like every RPG should have that quest, and then there should be an option about like, do you know who the fuck I am? Like, no, go find your own chickens. I got shit to do. Like I'm on the trails of the last devil demon from hell, and you got me finding chickens. No, go find your own chickens.
They should just do like a real D&D game would do, and there's just a jobs board at the tavern. So if you're about those jobs, you just don't do them.
Yeah, no, I got other stuff going on. Sorry, go find your own chickens. Just give me the XP or whatever the reward would have been, and let me move on about my day.
By like 5 XP that I get for finding your chickens.
Yeah, exactly. There's the one under the pot that you never know about or whatever. Yeah.
God.
This kind of reminds me of remember it came in the news of a few weeks ago where Kevin Bacon like disguised himself and went to live as a regular person, like quote quotes regular person, and like wrote about his experiences. It was like, yeah, this kind of sucked. I miss being famous Kevin Bacon, and like. I like to imagine you being the super powerful guy who slayed all the monsters and gods in the previous town and then coming to the next town. You're like Kevin Bacon wearing fake teeth and glasses and just like existing as a regular person for fun.
You're like undercover hero or whatever. Like
yeah. That's how I have to headcanon to myself, because otherwise, yeah, you're right. It is pretty ridiculous. Wolfman, what have you been playing?
Sorry, I had the mic turned off so I could get a link to the Kevin Bacon story. Because remember, everyone, the Avocado Gamescast has an eclectic and very large selection of links for the stories we talk about. If you're ever interested in any of them, consider going and checking them out. I have been in an exciting, like, a superstar spectacular of games. Like literally, I've been playing 4 games. I'll just get through them quickly and focus on the one that will probably be the most interesting to talk about. Let's see. Replaying Dark Souls. Just beat Ornstein and Smo. Really forgot how very difficult those large, like, super boars in the Duke's archives are. So I guess I'm fighting Nito first. Balatro. This game rules. It's honestly might be one of my absolute favorite roguelikes. It's just impeccably designed, incredibly addicting, and granted, I'm still losing with the no face cards deck. So instead, we're going to talk about Celeste, which I am playing for the first time in many years of a very aborted run. It's also great. An excellent, really lovely designed platformer that is just beautiful. It's smart. It is tough but feels fair, and exploring it and actually like going into it feels great in the way like the best Mario games feel. Like an absolute tour de force. I'm not going to talk about these beyond that though. Instead, I'm going to talk about Borderlands.
Oh no, that was a big
Oh wow. Oh wow. What, the first one?
Yes, Borderlands 1. I've got an article series that I've been doing for this year. Each month I play a game from 2009. And this one I chose because about 15 years ago, one of my relatives saw the cover at a GameStop and bought the game like dirt cheap for me. And I just never bothered to play it until then. What's weird is that the cover is actually just that generic GameStop cover, not the random bad guy pretending to shoot himself in the head cover.
Oh, so it's just like the one with the Borderlands like font and logo on
Yes.
the front.
Just generic, like Comic Sans logo. Um, Borderlands is fascinating. It's not good, but it's fascinating. This is, for those of you who are less familiar with it, essentially patient zero for the loot shooter, one of Kappa's one of your favorite genres.
Yeah.
The goal is that you have guns, you shoot guns. When the enemy dies, they drop gun. You see whether your gun is better than their gun. If theirs is better, you take it, you sell old gun. If not, you sell new gun. And you do this for basically about 25 hours. With the main distinction being that the series is essentially like an obnoxious, like, Comedy Central sitcom. It's essentially like a South Parkian, Rick and Mortyan, like, version of Mad Max. Every part of this is incredibly obnoxious to me. But despite that fact, and despite the fact that, again, I don't think it's a good game, I found it, it went down pretty easy. Like, it is a game that if you want to talk to your sister on a long phone call, just shooting guys called psychos who carry shotguns and occasionally getting into a car that controls very badly, this is that game for you. But
So it's like a podcast game.
yes, it really is. Like, my understanding is like one of the most popular parts of Borderlands is the multiplayer, and very neatly that includes like split screen, like local multiplayer, not just online.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this was during the time where it seemed like every other company was only doing online support and no local multiplayer, and this doesn't do that. It's I respect that a lot. But I decided to focus on this one and not, Dark Souls or Balatro or Celeste, like greatest games of their eras. Because, well, to be honest, because we've been referencing Might and Magic and Baldur's Gate 3, and it's possible, Merve, that you'll be talking about an RPG in a few minutes.
Oh, I'm definitely talking about an RPG.
So here's the theory that I got, and this is partially because of the fact that the first game in this series that I've been doing was Dragon Age, like the archetypal modern Western RPG, is that Borderlands shouldn't play two games that start with the same letter, clearly.
Very different games, too.
Yes. Is that Borderlands feels like the anti-RPG.
Yeah, it doesn't want you to play a role, that's for sure. It's just going to beat you over the head with whatever you want, but it doesn't really care what you think about its game world or things like that, which is why I think the movie's so surprising to me.
I'm morbidly fascinated. Only morbidly, but fascinated. You have when you start the game, you choose one of four characters, either Roland, who is kind of like average and, from my understanding, just the generic basic guy, Lilith, who has magic, Mordecai, who I picked, who is the sniper, and then Brick, who is just the melee guy. And they're treated as characters, but also not really. You're not playing a character. You're not hanging out with the community. In a game with a silent protagonist like Persona 5, Joker will have unvoiced dialogue you choose, right? There will be a thing where Yusuke will ask something stupid and and then Joker will say, "This is stupid," or "This is pretty cool, Yusuke." This doesn't actually happen. These characters have quips, but when you talk to someone, they just talk at you without it's so weird. There's all this to me, the thing that I would say is what I consider the two pillars of role playing to be the idea of abstracted content. So, like, in a turn-based battle, everyone takes a turn instead of just fighting in real time. And then what I'd call, like, choice and consequence. Like, the idea that you make choices and those actually will have effects. And you can't pick everything. And in Western RPGs, that comes with those moral alignments and choosing whether your run-through of Baldur's Gate is going to have those people being killed or not. In Japanese RPGs that usually don't have as many of those kinds of, like, that interest, it's usually on, like, who you can take with you, or what powers do you choose, or do you pick Squirtle or Charmander or Bulbasaur knowing that the others will be taken and won't be available.
Right.
This doesn't have that. Like, the reason I only mention this is because it uses the mechanics of RPGs. Like, it's a shooter, but everything it has is just stuff you could find in D&D or Diablo or Dragon Age or the original Baldur's Gates. Enemies dropping, like, a ton of loot that is 90% of the time completely useless. There's quests, there's, like, enemies that you endlessly fight, you level up, you have skill trees, but it's all done for, like, the opposite of what I would consider to be, like, the aesthetics or, like, ideals of RPGs. This is the thing.
So it's almost like it's using the scaffolding and the stats of RPGs almost in service of themselves instead of in service of a larger narrative. Is that what you're getting at?
The other example I would say is it's kind of reminds me of neo-noir. Basically, film noir, like, the original classic film noir is, like, the 1930s to the 1950s, and every noir that was released after 1959 is a neo-noir. And some of these movies, like, they borrow, like, the actual themes of noir, which it tends to be, like, surreality, sexuality, like, psychosis, anxiety, a lack of stability, and a, like, belief that, like, things are just moving in this terrifying and, like, very dangerous direction. But a lot of modern neo-noirs are just, like, basically cool cop movies where people wear fedoras. Like, the aesthetics are there, but not the heart. But in Borderlands, the heart is there, but not anything else.
It's just like a heart that's pumping blood to nowhere.
Exactly. Yeah, it is
very visceral.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, and maybe this is why the 27 hours I played of Borderlands went down as smooth as they were, because otherwise it would just be, oh, cool, I've got another rocket launcher. This one sets people on fire instead of just blowing them up. Because I just found this experience just really interesting and weird. Like, just seeing the birth of something, like, very scary and very unclear. And so that is my Borderlands story.
It's almost like you're falling into the Skinner box, and you intellectually know that that's what's going on, but you're just letting yourself get absorbed by it.
I've had this experience a lot with MMOs, and I've always described it as, like, noticing when you're on the treadmill, right? Like, I'm doing this thing to do this thing to get this thing that'll let me do this thing to get this thing to do this thing, but I'm not really progressing, you know?
I mean, for me, that's just Candy Crush, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with Candy Crush. I have played a lot of it, but but that's, I mean, when you sort of take all of the, like, storytelling element out of an RPG, that is what you're doing. You're leveling.
Yeah, it's comfort food.
Yeah.
I kind of reached that point with, like, Genshin Impact, and I kept playing it for several months after I'd reached that point. And, like, because it does become kind of addictive, and it's not like it's unfun. It's not like I feel like I wasted my time. But it also feels like I'm not absorbing anything new. Right? I'm just experiencing the same thing in a slightly different variation as I, like, add +1 to one of my stats, or get a new resource, or get a new resource to get another new resource. That kind of thing.
You see, and then the angle for me that really gets me going, that this same kind of idea is in Destiny, is now you add 5 other people who you're playing with all the time, who all have separate goals and things like that, and then that's where your desire to get things done and theirs kind of dovetails, or it doesn't, or then like you're building a world around that. That's one of the things that I think maybe is like my strongest pull back to Destiny, which is a lot of the same DNA as Borderlands, is the second you add in real other people, to help you achieve your goals, it has a really weird feeling. I know technically Borderlands had raids. They were maybe the worst thing I've ever done in a video game. But that pull, I think, is something that, when you add that to the looter shooter, you add the real person on the other end who's sitting in Discord waiting for you to help them find this special gun or kill this special thing. That's the layer I think that Borderlands missed that Destiny had.
Oh, that's like how Deep Rock is for me and my friends. Like,
yeah.
And with Deep Rock Galactic, you don't even really have that narrative layer wrapping around it. It's just like it is with the original Borderlands. It's just you there with the mechanics and the setting and the aesthetics of all the trappings. But I'm not like advancing a story. Like there's, I guess, a little bit of lore, but no one's paying attention to that, right? So like I completely get what you're saying, that when you play these kinds of games co-op, it's almost like the need for that narrative element or that deeper substance just kind of melts away, and you're in it for progressing with your friends.
Yep, exactly.
And again, like I don't get to see that with Borderlands itself, which is perhaps a bit of a shame.
Yeah, my Borderlands experience was really weird too, because mine was somebody showed up, threw like millions of the best things in the game on the floor and left. They spent the rest of the game being like, "What's the point of this?" Like I wasn't even chasing guns at that point, but I still think about that. How that one guy was like doing me a favor. I guess there was a dupe glitch around that time, but that was my experience.
I do want to say one thing though. Of all the randomly generated guns, a few of them were pretty cool. Normally, I didn't care about using revolvers because, like, I didn't care about using revolvers because it's like I'm playing a sniper and I prefer sniping in games. Why would I possibly use a gun that is large and doesn't have a scope and you have to be like 2 feet away from the person? But then, because of the luck of the draw, I got a gun, a revolver that shoots acid. And if you shoot enemies with acid, they dissolve in acid while screaming, which is fun. And also, it's a great way to deal with the enemies that are just otherwise super tanky and take like all of your bullets to just kill.
Yeah,
this thing
exactly.
got me. Yeah, this thing actually got me through what would have otherwise been like nightmarishly annoying parts of the game. And that's kind of cool. Like, it's kind of cool having that. In the same way that like getting a good role in a gachapon game.
And I think this is kind of the strength of these kinds of games, that everyone has these unique experiences, and then we all sit around our virtual campfire talking about like the cool acid guns we managed to earn. So I don't know, maybe they're trying to fulfill a very different kind of niche than like your typical single player action adventure game.
Yeah.
And I think that's valid. The game that I have been playing that I want to talk about is, as I alluded earlier, an RPG, and that's Dungeons of Hinterberg.
Came out
it came out a few days ago. This is like this has kind of grabbed my attention because it has this very striking flat shaded art style, with kind of like this mild comic booky cross hatching. So with something that's minimally taxing on your system, you can get like this really beautiful, almost like slightly but not exactly Mobius-ish aesthetic in the out in the wilderness. So what the premise of this game is that you are a burned out young lawyer named Louisa who's taking an extended vacation in the Alps. And this town, Hinterberg, is a few years ago experienced a magical event that caused dungeons to start appearing all throughout the like surrounding mountains and forests. And so it became a huge tourist attraction, and thrill seekers from all around the world come there for quote unquote slaycations.
All right, that's kind of clever, yeah.
But the way this setup works is like it is this dungeon crawling RPG. I describe it as what if Persona were an action RPG that was about 1/4 the length and set in Austria instead of Japan. And so what you do is in the early afternoon, you go slay monsters. In the evening, you hang out with your friends, and then at night, instead of an annoying cat telling you that you should go to bed, you tell yourself that you should go to bed. But apparently there will be at some point the option to either read a book or watch trashy reality TV at night. And I'm really looking forward to the point when the game lets me watch trashy reality TV. It's supposed to give you a stat boost. I don't know what stat it boosts, but I want to watch it.
It's like in real life.
Yeah.
This intrigues me because as somebody who just finished Persona 3, talk about a game that could stand to be 1/4 of the length.
You're just had some fights. Some people love that game.
I really enjoyed it, but also it is long, and that's not like I know the 4 and 5 are longer.
Oh yeah, I like 4 is one of my favorite games of all time. 5, I think I like it a lot more than where the critical consensus landed, even though I acknowledge its flaws. But those are both games I enjoy, and I would say both of them, even 4, which is one of my favorite games of all time, is just way too long. They're both about 120 hours, and at hour 105, I'm like, this. I spent more than 4 days, literally more than 4 days.
I also think
playing this game.
It's one of those things where like how it ends, right? Like I love Persona 5. It has kind of a weird, like, staggered pace by its end, where part of it's very, like, breezy, and then part of it's really long, and then, like, it's hard for a game to last that long and feel like the pace is, like, you basically needs to be, like, a non-linear, fully, like, self-directed game to feel like that.
Yeah, it felt like I spent over 200 hours on my playthrough of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and at no point did that in any way feel like a slog because of that non-linearity, because I had the freedom to just go do stuff. Whereas a directed experience that is over 100 hours long is going to eventually start feeling stifling, and I'm going to eventually want to break the bonds that the game has placed me in. Which is ironic considering what Persona 5 is all about. Maybe fitting.
Xenoblade, I think, is kind of the perfect counterpart, especially since like the ending can be more or less protracted than you want, right? Like the final dungeon isn't too big, and you can just go there, or you can just continue trying to like grind out your characters and do all the stories and hang out with Triton.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The other thing for me I'm thinking of is that this gives me like reverse Isekai vibes.
A little bit.
Yeah, like it's you're going to a magical world, but the magical world isn't another universe. It's just a place in Austria that has magic now. And everyone is going there because it's a fun tourist spot.
Yeah, it's like voluntary isekai, almost. Instead of, getting hit by truck-kun, you're just there because you want to be. So, it works out.
Sounds rad.
Yeah, it is pretty rad.
What makes it 7 of 10?
This is what have we been playing? So
Oh, is this
I don't know
my
if he's
God.
rated it yet.
Yeah, I want to say I would not give Borderlands anywhere near as nice of a simple as that.
No.
We're not even in the second part of the episode
not even,
yet.
I totally just decided that was clearly where we were.
That's okay. So just to like explain how dungeon crawling works here, the dungeons are actually like pretty bite-sized. Like you'll get through them in 20 minutes to half an hour, and like each one contains a mixture of combat arenas and environmental puzzles. Puzzles I think are actually pretty well designed. They use like each dungeon area, like the dungeons all fall in one of 4 areas. Each area has its own magic powers, and then those magic powers are used to solve puzzles. So you might get like a tornado power that can lift you across gaps, or you might get the ability to like telekinetically move bombs around, things like that. Use those to solve almost like the puzzles in a Breath of the Wild shrine, but a little, in some ways, a little bit more involved. And then there are also combat arenas. Combat's the one thing about this game that I'm not super in love with. Because I love the puzzling, I love the aesthetic, I love the setup. Narratively, I think even that this game is actually going to go somewhere a little bit more interesting than its cozy origins would suggest. Combat just feels really like the most generic version of the action combat you could put in a third-person action adventure game. So, like, you know, light attack on X, heavy attack on Y. You have a dodge. You have some magic powers that are on cooldowns. You have other magic powers that have like are regulated by mana. It's basically like lifted straight out of something like Nier Automata or Scarlet Nexus. If you've played one of those games, there's a better combat system in one of those games. Some of the magic powers are cool, don't get me wrong. It's just like I've played better versions of this combat system.
This reminds me of, oh, man, what's the game where you're a shopkeeper and you sell...
Reciteer?
Reciteer. I love that game. But like kind of like the puzzly, simple combat dungeons you kind of just get through, and the main game is, you know, selling things in the shop to the heroes and stuff. But that kind of reminds me of that game. I really enjoyed that game. So
yeah, I think narratively it has those like cozier components.
Yeah.
But I would say the star of this game really is the dungeons, and like they're like the level design here is impeccable. Like how everything's laid out, the pacing is really great. It's just I really wish they'd nailed the combat instead of just getting it to the level where it's serviceable, like not unenjoyable to do, but never more than like mildly enjoyable. So yeah, overall, I'm really getting a kick out of this game though. I think it will be one of my favorites by the end of the year. And I will say that even my last play session, a couple of wrinkles got added to combat that made it a little bit more fun than the combat was when it started.
Yeah, so. I really enjoy that, especially in like dungeon crawlers where you're getting still mechanics every time, and they're introduced, they're not frustratingly, you know, like tacked on. So I like that stuff.
All right.
I'm actually just wanted to say you've kind of sold me on this. Like, I already own Baldur's Gate 3, so hearing more stories about how good it is only making the wait for it more painful. But yeah, this looks really cool, Merve.
It's on Game Pass, I'm pretty sure.
It is on Game Pass.
I gotta say, one of the biggest selling points for me on a game typically is if the art style is interesting. And actually just looking at the pictures of this, and also I love a puzzle dungeon. This is a really interesting looking game.
I remember this.
Oh yeah,
we both saw this during not E3. We both said it looked cool, but we wanted to see how it played, and so it's good to hear that it kind of came together. Because sometimes those art styles don't work in a game. You know what I mean?
Like sometimes it's just the art style.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Like that's heavy shell shading. You just kind of everything gets kind of lost and washed away. But this one, like, the pictures and the gameplay don't really look the same.
I will say, like, the art style works in and of itself, and that's super gorgeous, but it also complements the gameplay in the sense that it's very visually legible, and at no point does the art style kind of obscure what's going on. So you can always read what's on the screen, and it looks really great.
That's cool.
So they really nailed that part, and I'm very happy for that. All right. let us get into the main topic of today's episode.
Now, I like one thing you said about the 7 out of 10 thing before we get into it, because this isn't like we didn't go on, Metacritic and figure out 7s out of 10s. These are just our own 7s out of 10s, right? So we're all on the same page here.
Yeah, we're not like thinking about games that literally got a 7 out of 10 on GameSpot or IGN. Yeah. We're just thinking about games that for us aren't all the way there.
Right. For myself, I also thought about it as like aesthetically 7 out of 10, not just a good So I wouldn't give the answer. I wouldn't give Super Mario Sunshine this, because it has a lot of positives and a lot of negatives that might, in more of an objective sense, lead to it being 7 out of 10. But it's too grand. It's too ambitious. To me, the 7 out of 10 game is something with perhaps more modest
ambitions.
Yeah.
I mean, also I give Super Mario Sunshine a 3 out of 10. Don't tell anyone. Hey, I'm not a Mario hater. I love 64 is one of my favorite games of all time. I really enjoyed Odyssey. I even liked Super Mario Wonder last year. So I'm not a Mario hater. I'm just a Sunshine hater.
I haven't liked a Nintendo game in 20 years.
Sunshine is a challenging game, and in ways good and bad.
It was one of the 2 games I had on my hidden GameCube.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You had your little clandestine GameCube.
My clandestine GameCube. It came with Super Mario Sunshine, so I have deep affection for that game.
I think you've been Stockholm syndromed.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. What games for you are your 7 out of 10s that you nonetheless hold a special place in your heart?
I think I got mine.
Well, let's hear it.
Well, it was a little hard because I don't really tend the games I love, I tend to be ones that I think are great or very good. But there is one I realized, at least one that really does fit, and that's Resident Evil Revelations.
Oh, nice.
Resident Evil Revelations is very openly a B tier entry, by its full design, and by that I mean it was a Nintendo 3DS game.
Oh, that's right. It was a 3DS game.
That was subsequently ported to every single console in the world, and you can totally get it right now. And it'll probably be on sale, and if it is, you should get it. It's very... I said before, that the 7 out of 10 game ideally is modest, and this is a modest game. It is basically it's half Resident Evil 1, kind of slow, not a lot of enemies, not a lot of ammo, but then also, and it's on one cramped space, but then it's also kind of Resident Evil 4, or you've got a similar camera system and a similar aiming system, and there's more of that crazy War on Terror serialized stuff. But it's fun, it's interesting. Being set on a boat is really cool. Also, spoiler alert, it's actually set on 2 boats. There are
Wait, what? What? This sounds like some 999 shit. Set on 2 boats.
Yeah. So the premise is that Chris Redfield has disappeared and is believed abducted by some terrorist cell running off a old fancy mid-century yacht. Or cruise ship.
I had no idea that was on a boat. I thought it was in a sewer the whole game, but yeah.
And then it turns out, and Jill is our protagonist, and she's going to find him. And then it turns out that you start playing as Chris, and you're on the same boat, and you're looking for Jill, and neither of them can find out. And then they realize at the halfway point, the reason is because they're on identical boats.
I'm sorry, that's incredible.
Also there are
what a reveal.
There are also literal B plots, in a thriller, a prestige thriller, where there will be a main actual subplots for other characters. They have.
Oh yeah, so so that's how they get their best supporting actor nom.
Yes, they have that. There are characters who only exist to be in 1 or 2 chapters to give.
So weird.
So I guess in some ways it's a little bit more ambitious than what I'm suggesting, but it's still very low rent, very much this is kind of a side thing. But what really gets me is that this is the game that came out between Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. While Resident Evil became like increasingly focused on action, dumb action, a lack of real interest in place or scares or like setting, this actually really dug down to look at the stuff, like look at both phases of its history and find something really interesting therein. It is not a great game. I cannot imagine it would be anyone's favorite Resident Evil game, and perhaps it doesn't deserve to be. But to me, it's really good because of its modest aims.
But coming from a 3DS to actually get that kind of release, or a 3DS game kind of release, kind of does say like, hey, there's something here.
Yeah.
That's very rare for like a 3DS game to get like that kind of like big platform release. So I really like that.
Yeah. It also has possibly the stupidest outfit in the history of Capcom.
Which is?
There is a mysterious like femme fatale character who wears a wetsuit with one pant leg.
Huh.
Also, she also has a counterpart who kind of looks like Carrot Top, but that's not as embarrassing.
Sure?
No, I think looking like Carrot Top is probably more embarrassing. that hair color was a choice. So, Kappa, what about you? What's 7 out of 10 games
I've got a big list. So, let me ask you this. I'm going to go down the list, okay? Do you want a game or do you want an entire series? Which one do you want first?
Let's get spicy. Let's go with series.
Okay, you ready for this? The Ace Combat series, I think, is a 7 out of 10 series that I really enjoy. One, obviously, it's got all the goofy dialogue you could ever want, right? Go fly with the angels and all the other weird stuff that they say. You've got these fake countries at war with each other, and the only solution is one pilot with unlimited missiles to shoot down all their complicated scheming aircraft. They kind of tie in some real world stuff, but not really. But you're flying real world planes, but the rest is all made up. It's got a story for basically no reason, but okay, sure, it ties in the missions. They put nothing but anime characters on jets left and right. So it's got a lot of goofiness to it, right? So it's hard to recommend. And the reason I think it sits in that 7 out of 10 is it's not quite a flight sim, right? So it's hard to recommend to people who want a flight sim, right? But it's also got a lot of like that realism added to it, where it's not like a bullet hell or like a shooter. You've got like, missile lock-ons and different like amounts of flares and when to use chaff and stuff like that, right? So it kind of straddles a line between arcade and realism that I don't think appeals to a ton of people. But the people that it does is that 7 out of 10 spot again, right? It's a lot of fun. There's not a lot of modern arcade flight games anymore. But Ace Combat has been swinging for a long time. And it's got that goofiness to it that I think a lot of people kind of have equated at this stage in its, game span as more like a charm. It's more charmingly goofy than anything, right?
Right.
And you got these weird kingdoms at war, and the princess wants to fly a plane, and things like that. But overall, like it's a fun series, but I think it's a 7 out of 10 series through and through. It never breaks any grounds. It's never going to win any best of awards. It's kind of its own little world, and they just keep making them out, and they keep staying very good, but never hitting that great window that kind of pushes them out into a at large. They're not, whenever they run, like, okay, what year is it to give Microsoft the Flight Sim Award? Is what they maybe have a chance at any of those other years. But Ace Combat to me is a 7 out of 10 all day series. Not a bad series, just an enjoyable, I like it, 7 out of 10 series that I think lives in that kind of sweet spot of there's not else a lot like this, and it's a fun game, but it's not going to move the genre to mainstream or anything like that.
I have two things. For one, your description of the series like plot makes me think of like how every Mario game is built around like the moveset of a person who primarily jumps. Like you have enemies that you can jump on and enemies that you can't jump on, and you have to like move around using your jump. Except in this case, it's like military aircraft.
Yeah, exactly. Like in every game, it's like, oh no, they built a Death Star. What can we do to stop this?
When all that you have is a fighter jet, everything looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
But you've also kind of, you're kind of selling me on this. What would be like you would recommend for like a version on modern hardware that you'd recommend for a first time play?
Fires of Liberation, Ace Combat 6 is the one to start with, for sure. Now that's not too ancient. I think that's like your 360 era, right?
Yeah.
But the Amerian capital has been attacked by Estovakian aircraft, and you can do what you want with that, but it's very much that like Russia's attacked like basically France, and then it's got one of the most like iconic lines of all of the Ace Combat series. They tell the guy to go dance with the angels. That's like, it just, when they say it, it's just so funny to me. Because like it's kind of like an insult, but then it later kind of becomes like a rallying cry. We're gonna go dance with the angels, and like the whole time the princess is cheering you on over your hair, over your like console and stuff. They have to go blow up these gigantic tanks that are invading the land, and it's very clearly you're fighting Russia, which is always kind of fun, There's a lot of kind of like,
wait, why is the princess cheering
I don't know.
you on specially?
Because you're the only one.
Why is she involved in military
you're
operations?
The best missile shooter in the whole Air Force.
And Merve, I don't know about you, but as a student of the history of Fire Emblem, I'm pretty sure that most princesses are very important in military as the leaders of military operations.
The best way I could describe this game, honestly, is you probably might have just nailed it. It's basically Fire Emblem, but instead of like casting spells and hitting people with swords, you get in a plane and shoot them with missiles. I mean, it's like it's got that kind of like DNA to it, like that wacky kingdoms at war, kind of like, everybody hates each other, and the only way to solve this is through aerial supremacy. There's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of like you're supposed to care about the weird worlds at war that they've created, and they don't continue each series. They're all new every time, and I don't know what I'm supposed to know about the Emerarians or the Estovakians, but they're real world stand-ins for other things. But like it's got that kind of like craziness to it. Like I don't want to just say anime, because it's a little bit more Fire Emblem-y, right? Like there's this war of houses and you're stuck in the middle of it. But yeah, I think I'm
gonna call it Valkyria Chronicles. Sorry,
but I think I don't know these anime, but Itasha, Idolmaster. I don't know what Idolmaster is, but
Idolmaster does not sound at all like this. Idolmaster is like an anime about, I think, like young idols in like a singing group.
Oh yeah, so sure. How would you like to paint your F-14D Tomcat in Idolmaster skins? Because you can.
I think that's just Bandai Namco brand
synergy,
synergy,
it's like kind
right?
of like synergy, but it is kind of funny. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, you know what goes good on this F-14 and Idolmaster skin? But yeah, if you start with 6, it's got all the cheese, it's got all the fighter graphics that you could possibly want. But 8, yeah.
It's also back compat on Series S and
Yeah.
Series X. It's disc only, but
One
looks
thing
like
I will say that they've really nailed in Ace Combat is they're beautiful looking games. I mean, it's not too hard to get those flight sims right, because you don't have to get like super high res on the ground and stuff like that. But the planes are really, really, really well modeled, and they just look pretty. Is the best way I could describe it. And then the fighting, you're usually just aiming at dots that you can never really see, but really fun way to play the game. Really pretty graphics and stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna post a screenshot in the chat, and you're gonna tell me whether this looks to you like an image from a flight sim. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah, that's the princess. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there are a lot. But yeah, it's what's kind of funny about like this series is like they're telling an anime type level story with like lots of um, ins and outs and things like that. But it's not as interesting because like I don't hate saying ludonarrative dissonance, but it's exactly that, right? It's like, oh man, there's so many problems in this world, and we can only fix it by basically flying our planes and shooting down enemies with missiles, and then the world will be a good place again. But there's a lot of that going on, and then there's this story going in the background about all this different stuff, and your character just kind of blows it off because really all you're there to do is shoot things down. So you can just hit start through the whole thing because it doesn't really matter. But when you listen to it, it's just kind of funny. And that's why it's in that 7 out of 10. They could do a Top Gun level, real world story with it, but no, they like the goofiness. They live in that, and most of the fans actually do too. So I think that's a pretty fun series, and I think it's a pretty 7 out of 10 series. I think even diehard fans would probably agree. Like, yeah, this is in that range.
well, I'm fascinated by this series. I'm very glad it exists. Thoughts? How about you? What's a series or game for you that's like a 7 out of 10 that you'll love like a 10 out of 10?
Now, I want to make it very clear that I have played games other than Kingdom Hearts now. It still makes up over half of my finished games, but not nearly as much over half as it was last time I was on this podcast. But all the same, it's Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, which is a garbage nothing game that was made for Game Boy Advance.
Oh, you're talking about the original Chain of Memories, not the even worse like remake.
No. I've only played it in Chain of Memories form because I don't have a Game Boy Advance.
Okay. For me, Chain of Memories was such a slog that I gave up and watched the cutscenes on YouTube.
Yeah.
No. I did not give up and watch any cutscenes on YouTube for my Kingdom Hearts playthrough.
You made it through the whole thing. I applaud you.
I sure
That is
did.
admirable.
Not only did I make it all the way through Chain of Memories, when I inevitably tried to rank my feelings on the Kingdom Hearts games, I kept having to convince myself, like, talk myself out of putting it second.
I just wanted to say in solidarity to Merve, I couldn't finish Chain of Memories either. I had a series about Kingdom Hearts and I couldn't do it, so I just watched everything on YouTube. I would love to try the Game Boy Advance version, but
yeah,
I heard the Game Boy Advance version is legit good. For the record,
it may even be. I am talking about straight up Chain of Memories, the port for whichever PlayStation I played it on. And yeah, so it's a garbage nothing game, made garbagier and nothingier by the port. And
which one was the mobile one?
a lot of them were. Microphone cut out again.
Yeah, I think your mic cut out. But which one was the mobile one that like nobody's ever really played start to finish or something?
Union Kai or whatever.
Yeah,
I think.
Union Kai.
Okay,
Union Kai back covers.
Okay.
No, Coded is also too.
Yeah, Coded is the one that you're probably thinking of.
Yes.
And then that got ported as cutscenes to the collection as Recoded.
Yes.
But Chain of Memories is the full game.
Okay.
Yes.
It's the worst.
Okay, this is worse than that. Okay.
Yes, no, it is a bad game. But so Chain of Memories is in between Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2. It was originally released for Game Boy Advance, got ported to PlayStation 3, which is how I played it. And so the first play, like, it's a game in two parts. The main part, the A side, you're playing as Sora, and you are revisiting every single world that you visited in the original Kingdom Hearts.
Except Tarzan, because they don't have the rights.
Except Tarzan, because they don't have the rights. But you have to build all the worlds out of cards, and also you use the cards to fight. This is probably a better game to play if you haven't immediately finished Kingdom Hearts 1 the day before. But it's a frustrating game on on a console for many reasons. For gameplay, for the fact that you're revisiting all of the worlds that you just played in Kingdom Hearts 1. For me, because I still didn't really know how to play video games, so there were some basic mechanics that I didn't figure out until the end of the game. But the reason that for me it's a 7 to 10 game actually has nothing to do with that. It's the B-side with even more limited gameplay that is in some senses even more of a garbage nothing game, but you get to play as Riku, and it's the first time that
Exactly. You get to play as your angry son.
You get to play as angry son. And it's like, I do think that the Kingdom Hearts games, to the extent that they are a coherent narrative, really...
That's not a very far extent.
That's a lot of room you're giving it.
To the extent that they're a coherent narrative, they are a narrative about Riku, and
yes,
that really begins to show up in Reverse Rebirth. It is the beginning of Riku and Mickey's friendship, which truly and honestly is my favorite relationship in the Kingdom Hearts game.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think that Chain of Memories story, or at the very least, like the Riku section, honestly, I kind of think it might be the best Kingdom Hearts story. Like,
it almost, like, this is what I'm saying. Like, it has that particular section of the game has probably the most coherent narrative arc of any Kingdom Hearts game. It really delves into this character. It sets him up for what he's going to do for the rest of the series. It's not really skippable.
Yeah, it's not.
It is the B-side with the even worse gameplay of the garbage nothing game.
I should also note that when I watched Chain of Memories for this article series, I was so excited, and I got done, and then like a co-writer was like, there's Riku actually has a story, and it's even more important, right? So I simply decided I'm just gonna watch the cutscenes, not watch 11 hours of like not really nicely done PS2 graphics.
Yep, and that's I periodically fall into these things where I'm just unfortunately cursed to have to do something all the way through.
Oh yeah.
So like I couldn't watch cutscenes, had to play the game. But I also, I mean, this is kind of a great episode for me because I tend to love stories most when they're kind of bad. And so this is just like, this game is in my heart. I love it. I can't help it. It's so stupid. I want to play it again now that I know how to play video games, but also I don't.
I think also, like, it gets a lot out of the fact that it's like, it's a remake of, I don't mean Chain of Memories is a remake of Chain of Memories. I mean, Chain of Memories is a remake of Kingdom Hearts 1. But, like, it's still kind of weird. It's still kind of unique. And if you just take it as Sora is struggling to retain memories he has to give up, / Riku has to, like, lose memories, but then forges this friendship with Mickey. Like, there is it feels solid, and it feels kind of scrappy in a way that Kingdom Hearts really isn't able to be anymore, and kind of wouldn't, like, the moment you could hang out with Jack Sparrow. Like, Kingdom Hearts was no longer able to be scrappy or like uncontested, right?
Mm-hmm. There is an earnestness to even the parts of that game that are schlock, that are bad, like there's something deeply appealing about like very honest jankiness.
Yeah.
I'll have to dig up the piece because it's on, I think it's on the Escapist, and that site's been gutted. Where I think it was written by Anthony Agnello, arguing that Kingdom Hearts is a big budget game with a big budget series with the spirit of fan fiction.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And like that's where that scrappiness comes from. It feels like Tetsuya Nomura got to go take all these Disney properties and then add a bunch of his OCs and like mash them together with his own action figures. And like it comes from someone who definitely has a deep and earnest love for Disney.
Yeah.
Like you don't make Kingdom Hearts as someone who dislikes the original properties or thinks that they're flawed.
I just wanted to also mention Kingdom Hearts 3 only exists because after like a decade, Disney relented and let him use Toy Story. Like that was literally his holdout by the end.
Really?
Yeah, he had wanted to use Woody and Buzz in Kingdom Hearts 2, I guess either as a world and then ultimately as like summons, and those were rejected. And it was according to Nomura, like basically Kingdom Hearts 3's development started with him getting the ability to use the Pixar stuff. So it's
And like I'm glad he did because the Toy Story world is probably the best world in Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, no.
It is a deeply fun world, and also to the extent that the Kingdom Hearts games have a coherent philosophy.
We're just working hypotheticals today.
What if, but to the extent that they have anything even approaching philosophy, it's like a world that kind of digs into it, right? Like, what's a heart? Could a toy have a heart? These are interesting questions in the Kingdom Hearts universe.
Oh, I agree.
I'm still stuck on the Xenomording. You I don't know. We've probably had 50 times on this podcast out of 100 episodes where we talked about Kingdom Hearts, and I'm like, "What's the Xenomording stuff?" And they're like, "Kappa, we've told you this 100 times. It's very simple."
It's an anagram. So if you take out the X,
Yes.
it's an anagram for no heart.
Okay.
Oh,
and then why
dear
do you take out the
God.
X?
And it has to have
Wait, Wolfman, did you just get that?
No, I literally only just got that now. The way I was going to describe Xehanort is he's Billy Zane, except he's actually Leonard Nimoy, except he's actually Rutger Hauer, except he's actually Christopher Lloyd.
I mean, he is
Somebody's like,
R.I.P.
"Oh,
Leonard
what a
Nimoy."
bad guy.
but
So, tell me about Xemnas then. What's that one an anagram for? Semen or we?
Zemnis?
Zemnis?
No,
Ansem.
Zemnis is
Ansem.
Ansem with
Ansem, not semen.
Oh, okay.
Is Xehanort
Yeah.
and also Zemnis.
Yes.
It's all very simple.
Oh,
But-
absolutely.
Okay, well, not exactly, because there's also an Ansem who is not Xehanort.
And he's played by Christopher Lee.
Of course.
But that's a different Ansem. To be
That is a
honest.
different Ansem.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed,
Right?
indeed.
Sometimes people just
clear
have
as
the
crystal.
same name.
Okay, basically.
Yeah, like D's, right? Like D's is
Yes.
Diz. Sorry, Diz.
Yeah, no.
Guess what?
by the
Okay,
way,
Kappa. What do you think
uh,
DIZ stands for
His name
in the
stands-
context of Kingdom Hearts?
I got
What?
it.
Just take a wild guess. What do you
Yeah.
think DIZ stands for?
What?
Diz.
Diz.
What? Diz. DIZ. What do you think that stands for?
Disney.
No.
Yeah.
It stands for Darkness in Zero.
No, come on.
Disney. The guy whose name is Disney, that's Yen Sid.
Oh,
Yen
Sid.
brilliant.
Yensid is Disney. Diz, which is meant to sound like Disney, so you're on the right track, but he's
common
Darkness in
name
Zero.
Of Yen Sid. So many Yen Sids I know running around.
Also, Yensid sucks. He's the worst.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, Yensid's a dick. I love it.
Like It's okay, Kappa. You know how in Street Fighter, like every time they can kill off Bison because there's a new Bison like clone body they can stick him in.
Mhm.
Imagine that, except that there's like 13 of them all operating at the same time.
Yes, makes sense.
Also, there's time travel.
And
So-
what is their goal? What would their goal be of these 13?
Here's the kicker.
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
Okay.
Because
That's what I was
the
getting
trilogy, the main trilogy concluded without actually answering any questions.
Yes, I know.
He
The
wants to.
Xehanort saga, as it were, is over.
Yes,
No more Xehanort. Now it's all
the Lost
I was-
Master.
is a Lost Master. It's wait, can I spoil it? Kappa, you're never gonna play this
I will
game.
never play this game.
It's all
It doesn't matter.
it is all Zigbar/Braig.
Yeah,
Braig was the
Braig.
so one of the 13 was actually masterminding Xehanort the entire time.
Which,
I mean,
Makes
his
by
name.
the way,
Hi-
means... Oh, go on.
I was gonna say that his name was Braig, and then he split himself into a clone named Zigbar, and Zigbar died, and then later on, Braig was like, "Yeah, I'm just calling myself Zigbar now."
Well, I mean, like, it's kind of like Axel.
Yes.
I love
Oh my god, that
I love how
infuriated
off
me.
the rails we go whenever these things get mentioned because
Yeah,
people
okay,
are like,
like-
"No, look, this is so easy. Look,
This
why
is
don't
so
you understand
easy.
this, Kappa?"
It's because Axel goes by because it's like it's supposed to be a metaphor for him like finding his heart without like remerging with his nobody.
Except
if I
that-
understand correctly.
Yeah, no, the real reason is that the fans like the nobody names and they don't want to care about the original names.
Well, and also, like, Axel's original name is Lee, and that's not that character.
Yeah. But
Have you seen him?
But doesn't like half this story like happen on like PSP games and like mobile games?
yes.
Yeah.
Kingdom
More than
Hearts-
half the story.
100% of Axel's story happens in days.
Yeah, and so don't call it days. Call it 358 days over 2.
Call it by its correct
Correct
name.
name. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we gotta make sure.
Call it by its Christian name, please.
The oh dear God, though. If I may, since we're talking about Kingdom Hearts ridiculousness, I might as well I kind of just want to hit you with this, Kappa. The plot to Kingdom Hearts Coded, which was turned into a 1-hour movie. So it turns out that someone stole some pages from Jiminy Cricket's journal. So King Mickey,
The bug?
Donald Duck, and Goofy hire the Rescue Rangers to basically build a machine so that they can study it, and then they send Sora in as a digital simulacrum of himself to go through Jiminy's journal to find out where all the data was stolen. And
Why does Jiminy Cricket know anything useful? Like, what is...
Because he's like he keeps your journal.
Yeah. he's also like one of the
That's
more
my favorite
like
part of that movie where he's keeping that journal very intently. I mean, he whips it out and he's just jotting on it down.
I mean,
Like
Jiminy-
honestly, this is one of the least ridiculous parts of the series.
Yeah.
Like Jiminy just records stuff. It's
Yeah,
cool.
I
We
like
got it.
He's one of the better represented Disney characters, I'd say.
It's Jiminy and Mickey.
Yeah, it's for me it's Jiminy, Mickey, Woody, Buzz, Rapunzel, and let's say Goofy. Sorry,
Well,
Donald.
I will
sorry,
say-
not sorry,
Say
Donald.
Goofy. But can I just?
I mean, no one likes Donald because he just like throws up Curaga when it's useless.
But like, at least
but, like-
he does something. Goofy doesn't do shit.
Goofy is
Goofy draws aggro just very poorly.
Goofy is like basically just there so that Sora can be an obnoxious little twit and then kind of have someone to just be the responsible adult.
I will say, and I mean this unironically, I think the version of Mickey in the Kingdom Hearts series is the best modern version.
No.
of
I really like
I-
Mickey. Yeah.
100% agree. He is a character. Jesus Christ, he's just a good like. He's a character who you're happy when he shows up because he's like making sense and you kind of get his personality and he's got interesting relationships and I don't know that that's true of any other Mickey Mouse.
He
So there.
Mickey is so good in Kingdom Hearts, like unironically so good in Kingdom Hearts, that one of the many flaws of Kingdom Hearts 3 is that it doesn't use him.
Because Kingdom Hearts 3 is like an hour of like unplot related gameplay interrupted by half-hour cutscenes with Riku and Mickey doing the actual plot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like that's the real problem with Kingdom Hearts 3. You don't play the actual plot of that game.
Yeah.
The whole premise of that game is that you're on a training mission.
Yeah.
While everyone else is doing the important stuff.
It really like, and also Kappa, to be clear, the last Kingdom Hearts game that had Sora in it was a game about him being on an entirely unrelated training arc.
That's not true.
Such
He
an
was a
anime
melody of
trope
memory.
that I cannot get behind. You know, like when they go power
No.
up for 15 years on some training
No.
planet or whatever.
No,
I think he's talking about Dream Drop Distance.
I am
Oh.
talking about Dream Drop Distance, where
Oh,
By the way,
that
the other
gem.
game where you can play as Riku and it's great. But
yeah. Well, it's less you can and more you have to, but I actually think that part's pretty cool. You,
No.
Kappa, you.
I can't get past Dream Drop Distance. What is that?
it's the best game in the series. That's what it is.
it is. It's a great game.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Did
It's
you
like-
drop a dream? A certain
Yes.
distance?
You do.
Oh.
You drop into a dream.
Distance into a dream.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Not all the way, right? Just some of the way into the dream.
No.
Well, sometimes not all of them, and then you have to fight a dumb minigame.
Yeah, you go pretty far into the dream, but it's actually quite a good game. It's got new worlds, which was a big deal for me when I was playing all the Kingdom Hearts games in 1 month, and interesting gameplay.
Yeah.
I was going to say about Rapunzel because it reminded me of when you were saying about the Kingdom Hearts games being like fan fiction. Of course, Rapunzel is in character because her world is just her movie.
Yeah, and her movie was good, so it works.
Yeah, but the fun part of that for me is because of that, you're not like Sora and Donald and Goofy aren't like doing anything.
Oh yeah, it's
So they stand around commenting on the scenes from the
Yeah.
movie, which is
and
like
then
hardcore of a fan fiction trope.
it's and then like except sometimes it would be like their old part where Eugene's like, maybe if those 3 guys I found in the woods, I can foist the problem on them. It's well, yeah, because after Kingdom Hearts 2, that kind of is what happened. Like
Yeah.
Pirates of the Caribbean was that, and The Lion King was that. And I think like it's so basically if it's Kingdom Hearts, it's dependent on either if the world is willing to be weirder, like the Pixar worlds, or if it's willing to be, or if the source material is stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So like, which is where I think like Frozen gets it at the worst, where it's a recreation of the plot but without any of the characters, and you can't hang out with any of them and you can't fight any of them, and they're just sort of like all doing...
Frozen was
You're just
clearly
hanging
something
out
else at some point,
Yeah.
and then like it was clearly something else at some point, and then it got cut to ribbons and turned into something else.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
Probably for longer than I intended. But that's okay, because it is the official video game series of the Avocado Games Cast. So I also have a bunch of games that I think kind of fit in my 7 out of 10-ish range. And I've talked about a whole bunch of these games on the podcast before. I've talked about Mario Tennis Aces and Human Fall Flat and Golf with Your Friends. But one I don't think I've talked about in this podcast before is Strange Brigade.
Oh yeah.
Have any of you played this one?
I have not.
Yeah,
No.
I remember this. Wait, maybe I don't. Yeah, this is it's based on Sniper, right? Like, is it the same engine as the Sniper series?
I mean, it might be.
I'm almost
but
positive it is.
The lore is different.
Yeah. It's Rebellion, I know that.
It is Rebellion,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm almost positive this runs on the Sniper Elite series because they slowly kind of combined this into the same series. But yeah, I've played this, and then there's some later ones that kind of get a little darker. But yeah, I remember this one.
Yeah, so Strange Brigade, I don't think ended up with a sequel, but I think they folded the lore into later games.
Okay.
I'll have to go check that up. So it is a 4-player co-op third-person shooter. There are a lot of those out in the market. What makes this one unique is its aesthetic. Sorry, I got tongue twisted there. Is its aesthetic. And that particular aesthetic is one of those old, like, pulp fiction adventure serials from the mid-century or slightly earlier. So, like, the kind of stuff that inspired Indiana Jones and later early Star Wars. And so, like, you have a narrator who speaks in pretty terrible alliterative puns with a mid-Atlantic accent who, like, narrates your adventure. He's extremely irritating, and I want to punch him in the face. But it kind of fits with the whole aesthetic. And it is pretty repetitive. Like, you're just going around shooting monsters in, like, Egyptian tombs and jungles and, like, old abandoned mines where treasure's buried. But it's very satisfying at a mechanical level. The shooting feels really good. The, like, being able to throw grenades, cooperating with your friends, it all feels really good. And it's one of those, like, really nice fun with your friends kind of games. Like, I doubt I would get a kick out of playing this solo, but when you're playing it with a group of buddies, it really is a good time. So
I think what I got this mixed up with was the Zombie Army games, which are by them. It's kind of the same idea, but yeah, but it was more of a direct spinoff. This seems like it's got, like, more of an actual game there.
Yeah, this is very much its own thing. And, like, yeah, you're just going to be, for the most part, shooting monsters in the head with a revolver, but sometimes you get to shoot bigger monsters in their weak points with a shotgun, and that's also fun. So definitely check it out if you want to play a third-person shooter with your friends. Just don't expect that. Just don't expect something that you're going to want to play by yourself ever.
Yeah, that's kind of how the Zombie Army games were as well. They kind of take that, like, occult Nazi stuff, into, like, the next level, and you're running around. Each person has, like, a special ability and stuff like that. It's fun, but kind of like, yeah, like you're saying, like, kind of inconsequential a little bit.
For sure.
Actually, it sounds almost like like Borderlands in a way, but maybe that's just because I finally finished it.
Oh, it does. It is a bit like Borderlands, except for you don't get loot really. I think
God.
you get currency that you can use to purchase upgrades. I think it's been a while since I've played it, but that's essentially what the system is. It was also on Stadia, so
I think it's got some of the same bones as the Sniper series. Setting the traps and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, you can set traps.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. Yeah. And you can occasionally fall into those traps. It has, like, those like adventure serial traps, like the swinging logs and the fire and the spikes, all that stuff.
I love that stuff.
It's very Indiana Jones,
Yeah,
or like the stuff that inspired Indiana Jones.
So,
speaking of which, there's an Indiana Jones game.
Oh yeah, you keep reminding me about that every week. Like, you tell me, or every podcast, I'm like, oh yeah, that's still coming, huh?
Yeah, is anyone, like, super pumped for it?
I've seen 2.5 Indiana Jones movies. So.
I'm not an indie fan, and to be honest, I realize this is perhaps the most pedantic complaint you could make, but I really don't think a first-person view is great for a guy who's most famous for using a whip.
Oh, yeah, you're 100% agree. Like, this, I think the only reason they went first person is they wanted to make it distinct from Uncharted and Tomb Raider.
Also, it's what they're familiar with too. Like, and that's
yeah,
perfectly
that
fine
as well.
Yeah,
it's just it's a bad fit for this particular character, this particular style of game. Or maybe they'll prove me wrong this fall, and it'll be the Game of the Year contender that I guess what would we be dethroning this year? Helldivers 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? I don't even know.
This is a rough year. I felt like Helldivers was a lock until like basically everything that happened after its launches. I don't know now. It's kind of a weird year so far.
I mean, we still like for me, like Dragon Infinite Wealth was like it would have been a lock if it didn't fumble the ending. Still my favorite game of the year so far. So.
I feel like a lot of people are going to try to make Shadow of the Erdtree its own game maybe and try to give that something.
As a DLC.
It will be treated as DLC and win, and that's completely just from what I've seen.
But past that,
I can't play it because, well, I can't beat Moog. Even at level 170 whatever, I can't beat him.
I don't know.
At emoji.
Maybe there's some chance for Veilguard. Maybe Veilguard will be the one.
I mean, like, to the extent that BioWare is still a competent developer, sure.
Yeah, much like to the extent that Kingdom Hearts has coherent storytelling.
Exactly.
So let me do this. I'll rapid fire some, okay? And you just yes or no these. You ready? Okay.
Sure.
This one I think that we might be in agreement on. Starfield.
Oh, so like the joke that I originally written into the notes, but that I took out was that I promised that I didn't come up with this topic just so that we could talk about Starfield again.
Okay.
Because like I think I've said this before. To me, Starfield is a 9 out of 10 game trapped in a 6 out of 10 game's body.
And it's getting there now. I've heard great things about the last couple patches, but
I'm actually really excited for the DLC
and
hoping that it
But that's kind of
makes the game what it should.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody wanted a 10 out of 10, but that's a 7 out of 10 that I really enjoyed. How about this one? Alpha Protocol.
Oh, Alpha Protocol is so hard for me because that game is broken to hell and back.
But what you can play is fun as fuck, right? So it's like, you know, I don't know. That one I think would be a 7 out of 10 for me. It'd be hard for me to call that a 5 out of 10. You know, and I definitely
would say
a 9 out of 10.
I think I've said this before again on this podcast, but I'll repeat it. For me, Hellblade is the worst good game I've ever played, and Alpha Protocol is the best bad game I've ever played.
So the two sides of the coin, right?
Yeah.
So like if you had to tell somebody, should you play Alpha Protocol? I'd say yes, and then I'd spend 10 minutes talking about all the fucked up stuff in it, right? But you know what I mean?
I would say no, but you'll love it.
Yeah.
Well, this could. Hey. This is for the next episode where we instead do games that you give 10 out of 10s, but with extreme caveats.
Yeah.
That's going to be the Danganronpa podcast, man.
You'd be crazy. That thing is so broke. There's missions that start with the alarm going off. You know what I mean?
That's a lot of like GTA missions, and they're all the worst ones.
No, it's a buggy game, but I think that to me is a 7 out of 10. How about this one? You ready? The Batman series.
Like the
Batman
Telltale
Arkham?
versions, or the
Arkham.
I actually agree on the. I don't know. The first one I'm willing to give a little bit of an above, and then the later two, I don't know. I don't like them.
It's tough, right? Like,
well, it's
My really hot take is that they got worse with each entry.
100%.
Asylum is fantastic. City's pretty good. Origins, if it weren't a buggy mess, would be pretty good.
Would you go like an 8,
and Night, I actually dislike.
So that's kind of what I was thinking on this one. I was thinking like an 8, a 7, and a 6, where it kind of, you know what I mean?
I'd go 9, 8, 6, 4.
Okay,
9, 6, and then I didn't play the other two.
But you're kind of landing in that 7-ish area as a series, right?
Actually, you know what?
Averaging out, sure.
Yeah. I think that's fair, right? And I think people would. Now, this one, Shelbyville Ideal stole from me when I asked this question on the open thread. Brutal Legend to me is the quintessential 7 out of 10 game, right? Fun as fuck. One giant drawback that it's very hard to get around, right?
On that note, Psychonauts 1, not Psychonauts 2, which is much better, but Psychonauts
that's-
1 is definitely on that. But then again,
Oh.
that also actually no wait, that goes against my own criteria because it's too ambitious. Ugh.
You put yourself in a corner.
See, I love the original Psychonauts, but I'm one of the few people who actually thinks it controls well. But I'm crazy.
But
so
do you think
don't
So,
listen
Brutal
to me.
Legend controls well?
Oh, I don't think Brutal Legend controls
Okay.
well. I think but like, I forced myself to play Brutal Legend. Wait, did I play it with a controller with mouse and keyboard? I can't even remember actually.
Either
now.
one's got you got to pick your poison with that one. That's for sure.
Yeah, because I think the action segments control better with the controller, but the RTS segments are better with mouse and
Yeah.
keyboard. And I think I compromised doing mouse and keyboard.
Yeah. I would say that's a quintessential 7 out of 10.
I would agree.
All right, you ready for another series? The Darksiders series.
Ooh, I really want to try it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay. 7 out of 10's though, right? right,
That's
I
the
put a lot
reason I
of time
want to
into
try it.
All right, this is one I kind of toyed with. Okay, you ready for this? The entirety of the Dynasty Samurai Warriors Orochi series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 out of 10s, right?
Well, you know what? Actually, the only of those I've ever played are the Nintendo ones. Shock of all shocks. Hyrule Warriors is really good, and it basically like hits the ceiling of the 7 to me. Like,
Yeah, I
it
think
is-
that's fair. Yeah.
I remember when like the first time when I tried it or when I bought it, it was after an AV Club review that described it as the most polished Warriors game and the least polished Zelda game.
Yeah, the repetition either becomes enjoyable or annoying, and it's hard to figure out which it's going to be for each type of person. You know, if you want to unlock every weapon and every this and every that, some people are gonna be like, "No way, I'm not replaying these missions 100 times." But some people are like, "Yep, I'm in it." Right? Okay, I've got one from a series that is a lot of 8s and 9s that I think is a 7 that I hear shit on a lot. Fallout Tactics.
Ooh. I don't know, because like I have a little bit of experience playing Fallout 2, and then beyond that I've played New Vegas.
Now, Tactics is widely hated, right? And it's in the early Fallout universe when everything was still very beloved, right? And it got knocked hard. But I think it's a pretty good tactics game, all said and done. The story is nowhere near as good, obviously, but you've got the Enon Zur soundtrack still kicking, you know. But I think it's a pretty solid 7 out of 10. And the only reason I was thinking about this is because it was included lately in the official timeline, when before it had been kind of removed from canon. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I appreciate that, at least,
Yeah.
that they're trying to unify everything.
And then I've got one more here that I don't know that, and this is to me, if you told me pick the 7 out of 10 game, the 7 out of 10 video game, I'm going to say Rise, Fall of Rome. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I remember Rise,
Son of
Son
Rome,
of
is it?
Rome.
Son of
Son
Rome.
of Rome,
Son
yeah.
of Rome.
Gorgeous looking game, very competently done combat. Looked really cool for the time. Lots of little flashes and things like that, but just like I never have felt like replaying Rise, Son of Rome. Didn't hate it when I played it. You know, it was a Crytek game, so you know it was going to look great, but it's a game that I feel like fell down that memory hole for a lot of people. But when it came out, remember, it was a launch title for Xbox One, and it looked like, hey, we're going to show off some stuff. But yeah, game fell through the cracks. I don't think a lot of people played it. I didn't hate it, didn't like it. The QTEs took me out of it a little bit.
I've heard that was probably the most criticized
Yeah,
element.
that's the 7 out of 10 part for me. I hate QTEs with a passion. So
another thing I would think of for one is WarioWare Get It Together.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like WarioWare is like itself really doesn't fit this because like it's aggressively shallow and it's aggressively weird, but it's so like singularly focused on what it does that it kind of just becomes more like I'd call it outsider art if it wasn't made by a multi-billion-dollar company.
Do you think that WarioWare Get It Together isn't as good because the Switch gimmick isn't as strong as like the Wii or the DS is?
Well, the gimmick of WarioWare Get It Together has nothing to do with like the Nintendo hardware. The gimmick is that unlike like a normal game where you like press a button or move the control stick, or in something like a game with motion controls, move the motion controls, it's that you control like a little 2D character, and you have to get them to do the thing. So like there's one where you have to uncork a cork in a sink. And so Wario can like use a shoulder bash, so he can knock it out more easily to the character who has to like move in a different way.
Yeah.
Like there are characters who jump, characters who you can freely move around. There are characters who can only like teleport. And so it makes it basically, some of the characters are just not fun at all. There's one character who is essentially on rails.
I only played the demo.
I actually didn't know about this aspect about the game.
I played the demo, and people were like, I remember when the demo came out, and I was like, this feels kind of rough. And everybody's like, oh, this is going to be, they're going to tighten this up. There's going to be so much more to this. And then it never really kind of, I don't know if it ever actually happened, but the demo was rough, I thought.
It's a really cool experiment, and it's an experiment that I never thought this admittedly very experimental series would do. Mm-hmm. But it's really cool that they tried it. Like the idea of there's like 20 characters and everyone has a unique have unique movement controls. Also, it
feels like that kind of negates the pick up and play nature of these things. Like the whole premise of these microgames is that you're supposed to figure out what to do on the fly, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit strange. Maybe an experiment worth trying, but an experiment that I hope they don't try again.
For a more simple one, Picross. Picross is perfect. I love it. I can't like recommend people play more than like one Picross game, but Picross is an amazing game, and it like I'm basically okay spending like $10 a year on just a few hundred of these puzzles.
Completely agree. Just to close this up, I want to mention a couple more games that kind of fit the bill. And the mention of Bandai Namco earlier and the work they do made me think of first a game that I think was intended to be part of a series, but I guess will probably end up being a one-off, and that we mentioned earlier, which is Scarlet Nexus. Pretty much the epitome of a 7 out of 10 game. A lot of like fun as hell combat system. The storytelling in that game is hilariously off the rails. This is a game with... Okay, fine, I'll just spoil it. Plug your ears if you don't want to hear what this is about. This is a game where all the soldiers look like teenagers, but are actually like 100 years old because they'll have to take like special serum that prevents them from aging but allows them to tap into their psychic powers. And they all act like teenagers even though they're like 100 years old. This is also a game where humanity had to leave to go to the moon, and then you're actually the descendants of the people who came back to Earth, and then you blocked off communication with the moon, and the moon people are trying to reach you, and then there's a cult of people trying to reach the moon people, and also there's time travel.
Excuse me, I believe I've played Nier Automata.
The only thing I remember the thing you said about them actually, like, they're not kids, because I was like, okay, this is an excuse for no, I'm not in love with the character that looks like a 16-year-old. It's actually a 1,000-year-old dragon princess. Like I remember that.
But there's no romance in the game, so there's none of that.
Yeah, I know. But usually that's like the excuse they use. But I remember this being like, why would they have them look like kids and stop aging, but they're also kids but not kids? And I don't know if that was that ever explained, or was it just like part of the story?
Here's the thing, it's actually one of the things they thematically address in the game.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, like it is a part. It's not really a part of the plot, but it is a part of. Or it's not like a major part of the plot, but it is something they do address in the game. in ways that I kind of forget because it's been a while since I've played it. But it is something that is addressed and spoken
Now this
about.
got a TV series though too, right?
It did.
Yeah.
It got an anime running concurrently, which I believe had the exact same plot as the video game. I don't think the anime was very successful, and I don't think we're going to get a Scarlet Nexus 2. I want a Scarlet Nexus 2 because I want to go to the moon. That combat system in low gravity would be freaking incredible. So please, Bandai Namco, send me to the moon. I'm ready to go.
How did it sell?
I have no idea. I don't think it sold all that well.
I thought on Game Pass, so I don't know.
Yeah, like Xbox was the promotional partner for this, which is hilarious because it's extremely out of the Xbox wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, this was when every 10 years Xbox tries to court JRPGs again. You know what I mean? It's kind of wild, but I've always really had Xbox is weird. They don't really cater to the JRPGs, but when they do something like Blue Dragon that is like secretly one of my favorite JRPGs ever. But like if you say that, people think you're crazy. But I love that one, So sometimes if they put their money where they want to,
Yeah, you do get occasionally things like Scarlet Nexus, which I think is really dope and has a really fun combat system.
And then
it's also just one of the most ridiculous games I've ever played.
And then sometimes you get them buying Tango Gameworks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. Anyway,
I wanted to
the
get
other
the
game
ones from Merve, the ones that I linked to you from the open thread. A couple of people had some comments as well to some of the games that they would add.
Yes. So, where did you link those?
In Slack. I think I sent you the.
Oh, okay. I will go open that up. In the meantime, the other Bandai Namco game or series I was going to mention is the Tales series. The Tales series is the epitome of a 7 out of 10 JRPG series.
It's never going to make anyone's best of list, but it's spoken of as a very good series. And I think it is, but I don't know anybody, if I said give me your top 10, even JRPG games, I don't know if anybody would have a Tales one in there. Do you think so?
Tales of Symphonia is very well loved, but I'm not sure about any of the others.
That is true. All right. Tales of Symphonia is beloved, but I don't think anyone's standing for Zestiria or Arise that much.
Yeah.
People like Berseria, but I think it's because they're really horny.
There's a lot of those going around, right?
Yeah, I think it's really the only really horny Tales games. Tales isn't a series known for being super horny, but Berseria is all about the horned, if you will. So, Kappa, why don't you tell us about what some of our community thought about this topic?
So, we kind of ask our open thread about a list of some of the different things that they really would consider some of the 7 out of 10 games that they've experienced or thought they want to add to the list. And Merv, you got a couple?
Oh, yeah. Lord Stoneheart says, Pillars of Eternity and Pathfinder Kingmaker. I haven't played Pathfinder. I have played a bit of Pillars of Eternity.
I have. And Pathfinder I definitely agree with at 7 out of 10. Because there's a lot of little weird mechanics in Pathfinder. There's an overland timer that I think is really annoying. And the game kind of just starts on its own. Pillars of Eternity is a tough one because I've stopped and started Pillars 10 times and I've only finished it once. I would probably go lower than 7 out of 10. I think 2 is great, but Pillars of Eternity is not. It didn't really land for me. I think because the story...
Pillars of Eternity to me is too crunchy for what it's trying to do.
I think
and it does not need to be as complex as it is.
And I think they fixed a lot of that in 2 because I've breezed through Pillars of Eternity 2 a couple times. Whereas 1, I just kind of struggle with that very first initial you get to the town, it just doesn't really feel. I posted this in the open thread. I really believe it. RPGs sometimes when you get to a town, it takes you out of the game, right? There's a couple games where I just get to the town and I want to stop playing immediately. I can't explain why, uh, but it definitely happens to me. But I do feel like I need to do a Pillars replay before Avowed hits, because I don't have a good feeling of that world at all. So I feel like I need to kind of jump back in there and try to see if I can get through 1 and 2 again. 1, I feel like I'll probably cheat through, and then 2, I'll do what I can. I agree on Pathfinder for sure. Pillars, I'd say I'd probably rank the first one a little bit lower, but that's me. Apple said Chained Echoes.
Oh, that's gonna be a spicy take.
Yeah.
People love Chained Echoes. Never played it though, so I can't comment. Raven and Rose says Tales of Legendia.
Oh.
Legendia?
Which kind of fits in with what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
I didn't know that there was a Legendia game.
Yeah. Now, Shelbyville also had a bunch of mine. So he said Far Cry 2. I'd go a little higher with Far Cry 2. I think that's like a 9-ish, right?
That's a hot take.
Yeah, I'd say every Far Cry after like 4 to me is a 7 out of 10 game. 3, I think you got a little bit of that spice there. Far Cry 1 was outstanding. That's a 9 out of 10 for me. 2, I think, yeah, there's some parts of 2 where I could see it being a little bit low. He's got Saints Row 2.
I kind of agree with that, to be honest.
Yeah. I would count the whole Saints Row series.
Yep, that's
like
another one I
best.
Oh yeah.
I could go with the whole series on that. And he also says Just Cause, which I would say is
Just Cause very much fits the spirit.
Yeah,
I mean, okay, Just Cause 4 sucks, but like those first 3 games,
Yeah,
classic 7 out of 10.
I'm gonna say like Just Cause 2 is so much of it embodies the 7 out of 10 so much that it kind of becomes transcendently like it can't be more than a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
But it is unparalleled at 7 out of 10ness, and in the best way. It
just
also,
leaning into the fun instead of like the other stuff.
Yeah, it's Just Cause 2 is the perfect 7 out of 10 game.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't mean to take up space again, but I'm just realizing because hearing like a specific Tales game, hearing Tales of Legendia, not just like for whatever reason, not the Tales series as a whole, made me realize Dragon Quest XI.
Oh yeah.
That is a 7 out of 10 game that is perfect. Like it is exactly what you want a standard JRPG to be and nothing else.
There could be a lot of Dragon's Quest though. 9 was, I thought, a very like okay, fun, but I remember like people were saying 9 was like a rebirth of the series, and it felt pretty good to me. But man, I must have missed something on that one.
Merve, you've played Dragon Quest XI?
I've never touched a Dragon Quest game. I don't know anything about Dragon Quest.
I'll be honest, I'm a little surprised. I basically just slot you in when I think of JRPGs. So,
that's very funny because
most of the ones I played weirdly, I played a lot of DS JRPGs. That was just my thing.
Kappa's actually played more JRPGs than I have. Because I didn't play JRPGs until I was in my 20s.
Okay, yeah, because I think it's because I tend to think of, like, when I think of JRPGs, I tend to think of them at their most, like, kind of more unique and more kind of surprising, and I always find that you have a really interesting taste. Like, tastes of stuff that I don't actually think of, like Dungeons of Hinterberg.
Yeah, I'm a hipster. Yeah. That's kind of my thing.
But Dragon Quest XI is very much like, it is almost like in the way that like a Borderlands would be a Skinner box of making you play. This is kind of a Skinner box of like, what do you want from a JRPG? Like, do you want skill trees? We've got skill trees. Do you want, like, a wacky party, including an old guy who might be a pervert? We've got that. Do you want, like, very elaborate, like, twists and turns, a boring, silent protagonist, a, like, kind of nice, like, cartoony art? Like, it's great at that, and, like, incredible.
Do you also have a like, female childhood friend? Who is now part of your party and is also the healer?
You have a female friend, but she doesn't join your party. There is a female healer who has another sister, and at one point they fuse, and then they unfuse.
Oh, that old fusing sister trope
Yes.
that we're all familiar with.
But it like has, and also, do you want to like have an insane thing where you fight a boss that is like basically a goofy eldritch thing and maybe also kind of an emoji? Yeah.
I mean, like the slimes are basically emojis.
Oh, yeah.
They're like a little smile.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
They're like blue poop emojis.
Yeah, no, they are. But anyway, I'm sorry for taking up that much time on when we should actually be using the viewer submission.
No, it's fine. We
No,
go
this is
for real
good.
all the time.
This is good.
So this one with Shelbyville, I don't know about this one. This one I think maybe is going to be more telling about when you played this game. Marvel Ultimate Alliance. I think if you play Marvel Ultimate Alliance today on a PC, it's a 7 out of 10 game because the controls in it are awful.
It's a game of its time. It's a brawler, and that's fine.
I think at its time though, it felt a lot more fresh and it controlled a lot better on consoles. So I would probably have that a little bit higher.
I also think that coming out like right before the MCU started, like is kind of adds a special thing of like these are in some cases some of the first like non-comics appearances of a lot of these characters. And now, I mean, that's fine, but if you want a game with a lot of Marvel characters, you're not, super limited for choice.
The thing that I think maybe a lot of people who maybe weren't into comics around then and have kind of come around since the MCU may not know is that Thor's and Iron Man's weren't really the cool comic characters of that time period. It was far more Punisher, Spider-Man, kind of like those periphery, like street level. Marvel Knights were real hot. Elektra, Blade, kind of a little more edgy.
It was kind of a strange thing where, like, in theory, the Avengers were the center of, or in theory, the Avengers are the center of the Marvel universe, but for, like, culturally speaking, it kind of took until the movies for them to actually be the center.
People were more into the street level stuff on, like, the cultural wavelength. That if it wasn't X-Men, because X-Men were kind of their own thing.
Yeah,
but
I
didn't know growing up. I don't know anybody whose favorite hero was like Captain America. It just, But now, of course, I get it. But back then, it was kind of. I've got Spy Fox 3 Operation Ozone from Fufuwa. I have no idea what this is.
Yeah, I'll confess, I am unfamiliar with it. Let me look it up.
It's a point-and-click adventure game.
Okay. 7 out of 10.
It's from the Spy Fox series.
Like edutainment?
There's another game in that series, I think that's called Dry Cereal. I don't really understand what they're about, other than that they involve a spy.
Oh, it's on Scum, so it's probably one of those types of point clicks. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Lord of Arcana from Alan Gabriel. TCRM suggests American McGee's Alice.
Yeah,
I think that's a good one. I remember when Alice came out, it was almost like this is an important game. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of like feelings towards that game being something huge, and then I actually played it, and I didn't connect with it, or maybe I was missing something about it, but it felt kind of dry,
Like Spy Fox and Dry Cereal.
Yeah. I think a lot of the stuff with American McGee is that he was kind of your counterculture auteur if you were at a certain age or if you had access to the right like computers for it.
But he came up through it as well. You know what I mean? He wasn't like,
no one. Yeah.
And then for a few more suggestions from Alan Gabriel, we have Virtual Quest on the GameCube, Mega Man Legends, both of them, which is probably a spicy take.
It's a hot take, but I want to subscribe to that podcast.
And I think one that a lot of people will agree with. Every single one of the 3 games made by Tokyo RPG Factory. That includes I Am Setsuna, Lost Sphere, and Oninaki.
Lost Sphere for sure.
I don't know a lot about them, but I do remember a whole like AV Club thing where people were talking about like I Am Setsuna being a like kind of trying to be this like heir apparent to a classic era of JRPGs and just kind of fumbling it entirely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely like I've only played Lost Sphere, which has a lot of okay. Is this an homage or is this a copy? You know what I mean? The battle system is Chrono Trigger. You know,
Yeah.
like it's there. I'm not at all. I think they called it like something like I can't remember the title of it was, but it was they definitely a nod to Chrono Trigger. You know, but yeah, it feels like they're doing a lot with it, but the game itself didn't hold up. I think that's I'm trying to think of what I would rate Lost Sphere. That's probably a little lower to me than a 7 out of 10. I don't know about I Am Setsuna or the other one, but Lost Sphere to me was. I mean, Lost Sphere was very hyped at the time. I think maybe a lot of people missed that one, but it came out with a lot of, this is a big game. And then like I played and I was like, this is Chrono Trigger. I don't know. Maybe other people had a different feel for it, but I thought I'd probably have it a little bit lower than a 7.
I think that's fair. There are some people who think these games are terrible as well.
Yeah.
So kind of runs the gamut from terrible to.
Well, that's
what,
like
it's
with
okay.
Batman. Like, you know what I mean? That's what I was doing with Batman. Like, if you got a 9 and then a bunch of 6s, I think it's fair to call the series a 7. You know, like if you ever told somebody to run the Batman series, I think you're gonna probably by the end they're gonna want to kill you. Like the first one's like, oh yeah, I'm feeling this. By the end they're like, oh, if I have to hit B one more time, but
Yeah, it does average out to 6.75.
yeah.
So,
I think there's some
there you
really
go.
good takes out there, though. I was kind of mad that people were stealing mine, but I think Brutal Legend is such a good one, though. I really do. That's such a, like, you're being held back by a weird combat system that no one, like, basically everybody hates. I've never heard anybody say anything good about that system or, figure out a way to make it work. But the rest of the game is so compelling. Like, you can excuse that part of the game still and finish it, just ignoring how bad that is, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you can make it past those sequences, because they are quite difficult, then yeah, I think there's something pretty compelling there. And finally, one last suggestion from our community. Kim Gordon Cenotaph says X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Ooh.
A game I'm not familiar
That
with.
is
That was
actually that is a hot take in a very different way, because people basically just treated it at the time as mostly just shovelware.
Yeah, movie tie-in shovelware. Yeah. So that's I think most people would probably have that as a 5. So I think that one is higher than what most people have, which isn't. I'm trying to think of the actual gameplay in that, because I remember it being like there was a style of that game at the time which was kind of like a wandering superhero game. Like remember the Hulk Incredible? Was it Ultimate Destruction?
Ultimate
There
Destruction,
was a
yeah.
lot of that style of game, but I remember this one being better than average. But I think I played it on Xbox, so I don't know if maybe it just looked really good on Xbox, and that's why I thought that. But I didn't hate it, but I don't remember if it would be good enough for a 7. That'd be one maybe I'd have to revisit.
We don't get like low quality movie
No,
tie-in games
no.
anymore. I think we've lost something as a
'Cause I think
society. Nature needs to
Yeah,
I
heal.
mean, we're like everyone's now like in the era of actually good like
Well,
licensed
except
games.
I think it's hard.
We need. I mean, like, if Suicide Squad had been a movie tie-in game, the level of contempt for it, I think, would be lower.
Yeah.
Well, also
Right, it would be-
it probably would have helped if there was an actual timetable for that game coming out.
Oh yeah,
It's
they canceled its. They postponed its release. What, like 6 weeks out from its original release date or something like
You know, I
that?
just got it free from Amazon this week.
the
Oh yeah.
actually
I don't see. The thing is, I don't have Prime, so I couldn't get it
actually,
free.
Merv, now that I'm thinking about it, like one of the fun additions to the movie The Suicide Squad, not the game Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, is its inclusion of like a number of like weirder characters and a number of more obscure characters, none of whom are in the game. And the reason I mention this is because the game is somewhat notoriously a shooter, while featuring characters from DC Comics who are known for using things that are not guns.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you have a guy named Boomerang who should be throwing boomerangs, right?
Because
You have King Shark who should not be using a gun. King Shark should be, I guess, biting people,
yeah,
right?
but like,
Punching them.
Idris Elba is in the Suicide Squad as a character, as a D-list Superman villain who is fun enough in that movie that he probably bumped him up to a B-lister now. Like, he uses guns, put him in. Like, I think it would have been annoying, like aggravating in a different way. I don't think Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was ever going to get a positive review. I just don't think the mechanics that led to that thing existing.
Yeah, and I do agree with what Merve is saying, that kind of like disposable, like fun, never think about it again superhero game that was just kind of a one-off, you know. Now they're multi whatever, like Avengers and Suicide Squad. They're too big for their britches, basically. You know, I would have played a Suicide Squad movie tied in that was kind of a disposable 7 out of 10 game, but they really, really tried to make that thing something else.
Like all the live service attempts.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
failed.
no,
Right.
I think it. Like, I understand why, from a branding reason, you go with superheroes for live services, but I think the successes of Batman and Spider-Man, like, it's not just because they're Batman and Spider-Man, it's that they do provide a very, like, singular, basic power fantasy, and you're not, like, spending your time trying to upgrade the Hulk's, like, endoskeleton or whatever.
I think
yeah,
that,
like I don't understand how you can have like armor sets for the
Yes,
Hulk when
exactly.
his most defining characteristic is that he's running around in torn shorts.
That's why I always think that the most successful model, if you ever wanted to go live act or live service, is you have to give the character a blank slate, right? I can't be going and finding uniforms for Wolverine, right? Let me make a superhero, let me run around with Wolverine, and I'm a part of the X-Men and this and that, but my character needs upgrades for his armor as we find it, and that gives me something to chase, but it doesn't feel as artificial, you know?
They did have that MMO. It was called City of
Yeah.
Heroes, right?
It was a success for its time, yeah.
I think City of Heroes might still be going.
I think it's like a fan server or something. You got to know somebody to know somebody, I think, to get in. I think it's kind of on the down low.
Yeah, I think I like read also like a thing of DC Universe Online is like still around after over like a decade, just apparently just quietly doing its thing. I think with like the modern phase of like licensed things, the assumption is that people want a bespoke product, right? Like it's not just I want a game with the Ninja Turtles. I want a game with the Ninja Turtles that has one of the best soundtracks of the year that came out on.
Yeah, and
with like pixel perfect like pixel art and really satisfying gameplay and difficulty options. Like these, like I'm using Shredder's Revenge as an example, but I think that generally speaking, the consumers kind of expect the licensed stuff they get in games to be as prestige or at least as polished as what they're used to.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take because there's something between shovelware and like AAA, right? And we can call it AA, we can call it whatever we want, right? But historically, it's been that 7 out of 10 area where superhero games live, where like weird comic book games live, where RPGs that try to do a million new things live. But like, I think it's hard to tell people why one game's a 7 out of 10 and one's a 5 out of 10 without actually having experienced it, you know?
Yeah, and especially for superhero games where frequently that dividing line kind of boils down to how well the mechanics capture that superhero fantasy. Like with games like Avengers and Suicide Squad, where the different superhero kits have to have enough in common in terms of controls that it kind of flattens and homogenizes everything. You can't really do anything unique or notable with the kits, and that kind of limits what you can do in terms of making the mechanics really tailored towards the characters. But in a game like the Batman Arkham games or the Spider-Man games, where you can tailor the controls, you can tailor the gameplay to the particular superhero kit, there's a lot more you can do, and you have a lot more liberty to really mold the game around the characters.
Yeah. And if you don't have like the entire life of your studio wrapped up into the game, with so much money
That
that
also
if
helps.
it fails, you go out of business. Yeah, it helps, right? So, hey, I know we didn't cover this in the news or anything. Bethesda is unionizing, and
They
apparently
are.
Microsoft's okay with it. So that was one of your, was it this year or last year predictions that we're going to start seeing more unions pop up?
That was last year, I believe.
Should have made it again this year.
But I mean, I predicted layoffs would continue, which also
Yeah.
happened. That's not something I wanted to be right about.
I mean, I think both we're going to see both of both. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're going to see more unionizing. I definitely think we're going to still see a lot of more cuts at Microsoft and Bethesda included.
Yeah, I mean, with Microsoft, I'm not making an excuse for them. The studios they shut down, I have no idea why they did it. But also, you got to remember when you buy huge companies like that, all of a sudden you've got 3 HRs,
It's
like.
I think we know the reason why they were shut down.
Mm-hmm.
They were shut down because they just released games, and Microsoft did not want to spend the money to fund them to make
A new one,
games.
yeah.
So, like, I mean, and this is.
I mean, that's why Tango and Arcane Austin got shut down. It's not really clear why they shut down Alpha Dog. But, I mean, I think it's probably because they didn't. Mighty Doom was not that big a success.
That's what I would guess too. Yeah, I think sometimes it depends. Like, we don't know always behind the scenes what's going on, right? Like a lot of times, like we assume, oh, EA's making BioWare make Anthem, but behind the scenes, apparently BioWare's like, this is the game we want to make. This is going to be a huge hit. We want to do this. This is what we're going to put our talent and our money behind. And then, sometimes you've got a studio who really believes in something and puts a lot into it, but the game just isn't good, So I don't know how you reckon with that as a studio. If you're like,
I think you.
I mean, that's definitely not the case of what happened with these Microsoft studios. Hi-Fi Rush, extremely well received. And in the case of Redfall, that was imposed upon Arcane Austin. It's not really what they wanted to work on. In fact, led to a mass exodus of developers.
It wasn't imposed by Microsoft, though, right?
No.
It was imposed by Bethesda.
That's
that's true.
I mean, yeah.
It was imposed by Bethesda, and then after Microsoft took over, there was an internal assumption that Microsoft would kind of like either
Cancel
right the ship or cancel it or right the ship or move it into something that Arcane was known for, and Microsoft kind of notoriously had a very hands-off like approach, not really bothering to change that. So it's I don't know. Anyway,
I mean, it is. I will say, those were downer decisions.
Yeah, I agree.
Those are unacceptable decisions, and decisions that should call Microsoft Gaming and I think Microsoft like HQ leadership both. Like I think Satya Nadella has kind of gotten off scot-free in this, and he really shouldn't. And I think it calls that leadership into question. But I will say, undeniably, this unionization news is good, and I'm very glad to hear that over 200 Bethesda employees are unionizing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who kind of get locked in on unionization being something that like happens slowly, but it doesn't. It can snowball. You know what I mean? Once everybody goes, well, if Bethesda can do it, why can't we? I think there's pretty strong evidence that if Bethesda can figure it out, so can name a studio.
If it's the larger the studio, the more people there, the more studios that are unionizing. It's a snowball effect, and Bethesda really needed it. Needed this. Like now that it's owned by Microsoft, before Microsoft bought it, like before ZeniMax bought it, this is something they're maybe not like I don't know about how to like rank studios that are in most need of it beyond everyone's in need of unionization, but for a company of their size and the
the ambition of their products that they're trying to do,
and also just like the sense that like everything they're doing feels like it's kind of teetering, right? Like it might become huge and then it might just utterly collapse, and like they kind of represent that as much as like EA or Activision.
Yeah, I don't. The thing I think about right now is I do feel like Microsoft got so locked in on Activision that they kind of let stuff go to the wayside and figured out once we own Activision, we'll figure the rest out. And I don't know that they really have, to be honest with you. I feel like they,
definitely did.
I feel like it gets. I mean, perhaps this is unfair, but I'll just say it. I think they got the shiny new toys at Activision and like kind of tossed the rest of their toys out of
Yes,
them.
they
Exactly,
did.
yeah.
No, that's exactly what it is.
And we'll see whether or not that pays dividends. I think, unfortunately for gaming enthusiasts, I think it will pay dividends. I think they will make a lot of money off their Activision products.
I mean,
But-
actually do know that the Activision stuff is the only part of them that were profitable last year.
Yeah, well, something like I think they said something like Game Pass this year is scheduled to like make like almost 250 times what it made last year, based on what they've seen. That's a lot of money.
Convinced. I'm
I don't know if I believe that number.
I think the assumption is like, I think the assumption comes in like there are now X new products on Game Pass, therefore it will get X new buyers, and I'm not really convinced. Especially since like especially since they're actively de-emphasizing the main product that you play Game Pass on.
Mm-hmm. Well, they just released a bundle on Fire Stick.
Yes,
An Xbox controller, Fire
it says
Stick,
like
and
it's something like no Xbox, no problem.
Yeah.
In the ad, like
That's wild.
It's. I think it's this is very much by a company that is. I think the thing I always say about Microsoft is that they have a cultural image of themselves as very powerful and dominating, like high-end technology and like full like cultural iconography, but that's not really true, especially in the sense of iconography and sales, since we know they've never been more successful than Sony and multiple times have been last place of these console wars. And so like it creates this weird thing where they're chasing the one thing and then struggling to build everything else around that instead of having like a brand that everything coalesces around. So like it was the Xboxes and now it's Game Pass, and apparently the now plan is to prioritize Game Pass instead of the console, which I guess means that they want more people to just game on PCs than own consoles, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think that attitude in large part comes from the fact that in other markets, notably cloud and enterprise, they are dominant.
Yeah.
There's basically nothing else in those spheres. And so from Microsoft HQ, you get this directive along the lines of, well, we can dominate enterprise, we can dominate cloud. Why can't you dominate?
Well, that kind of played out too today. I think somebody said something like one of the Microsoft people said they wish they had Sony's marketing budget or something like that, right? And everybody kind of did like like you're a bazillion dollar corporation. What do you mean you don't? And apparently they don't have a lot of marketing budget for Microsoft.
Well, I think, and I think like and I think part of this is why like I've always historically. And I'm going to preface this by saying that I own a 360 and I own a Series X. And I really loved my 360 and I do really love my Series X too. But they've always, even by the inherent nature of gaming companies being, like, it's all branding, it's all chicanery, it's all, like, that kind of, like, corporate facade. Even by that standard, Microsoft has always felt, like, very, like, artificial. Like AstroTurf, like it's like it doesn't have like it didn't really have like a history of game development. It just kind of came in as this sort of behemoth and then kind of just slowly and then very quickly just kept buying stuff up. There's not really an internal like creative corporate culture. I mean, it's not exclusive because it has Gears and Halo and Sea of Thieves, but a lot of the stuff that, like, a lot of the parts of the Microsoft brand were stuff that basically got big before Microsoft purchased them.
I mean, Halo technically does for that. They
even
bought
happen.
it.
Oh,
Yeah, that was going to be an RTS for Apple
I
computers.
was sort of under the impression that they had bought Bungie around the time that they started building Halo. So
Well,
that's
Bungie was looking to get bought by literally anyone, and they first started making their first plan was to basically pitch what would become Halo to I think it was Macintosh Gaming, and they got like laughed out of the room. So they're like, fine, we'll go somewhere else. But that kind of like started the whole like Mac isn't for gaming thing weirdly, which I don't know that Mac's ever really shook. So yeah.
But
Yeah,
so,
and then like, but I mean that characterization is not too far off from how Sony entered the market in the '90s as well. And like, I mean, they went on much less of an acquisition spree and did kind of develop an internal game development pipeline eventually. And now we've seen that pipeline kind of shift globally outside of Japan to North America and Europe, which has had its own consequences, and I think has, in my view, made the Sony ecosystem less appealing.
Yeah,
but we don't have to go down that road.
At least
But like,
it's not as like consistent. I would say, you know what I mean? Like where I feel like Microsoft's growth has been like a track. You know, I feel like Sony's has been kind of like reactionary, right? I have no idea why they bought Bungie for that much money. It makes zero sense.
It also makes sense when you think of the fact that the amount of money that like Microsoft put into those acquisitions of its own were also like I'm not saying that they were worth more than that, although the $69 is something that this company that they are going to rue for decades.
69 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they are going.
I mean,
because it's not just the physical cost, but now that's bumped them into this new thing where everything has to be a massive size hit. So
right.
That's the problem. They went from a rounding error on Microsoft's balance sheet to something that is a few percentage points. And when you're a few percentage points, suddenly Amy Hood and Satya Nadella pay attention to what your division is doing. And now, like, the leash on Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond and Matt Booty is a lot tighter than it was previously.
Especially after the stuff they've been, you know, if they're closing studios, stuff like that,
Yeah,
you know, it should be kind of,
I mean, it should. I mean, yes, but also those closures are Satya Nadella and Amy Hood's fault, as much as they are Phil Spencer and Matt Booty's and Sarah Bond's fault.
I think the purchase, the acquisition, I think that's on Phil most of all. Like, that dude is nuts. I used to basically think of him as basically the most, like, completely anodyne, like, utterly disconnected, like, business gamer fashion man. And then I found out that he plays, like, that he plays way too many video games. He plays more than I do.
Yeah, he plays
like,
a lot of video games.
People
who were friends with him online are like, he's just always on playing.
He had logged in last year 971 hours.
Yeah.
And we know he plays the other companies. Like, we know he probably played at least 10 hours of Zelda and 10 hours of Mario and 10 hours of Spider-Man. So, yeah, at least 1,000 hours. But like, it's this weird, I think he's fully, like, he does it as much out of like a weird brand like devotion as much as him being some kind of like shiftless, like.
I mean, I think he legitimately loves video games. That's not really the issue. I just think,
maybe he goes about it in a way that's unhealthy. Namely, like,
I think he wants to. How do I put this? I think he wants to project an air of being a genuine video game enthusiast, which is easy for him because he loves video games. But at the same time, if you're a business executive, like, as much as you want to be communicative with your audience, as much as you want to project an air of being one of them, right? It becomes a double-edged sword when you have to make, let's call them euphemistically, tough business decisions. Because if you maintain a little bit of a remove when you make those decisions, you are sheltered from the consequences. Like, people will lob stones, but you are hiding behind a gate and castle walls, and no one can reach you.
I think it's
If you've projected an air of being really open, of granting interview requests to games journalists, not just business magazines, if you've gone and appeared on podcasts, if you're very public, if you appear on stage at
I
events.
guess also want to make, and in his case, if you like actively court and like follow like the most absurd like Microsoft fan like Twitter accounts.
Yeah.
Like,
If you do all of that and you respond to those people, and then you go make a decision like closing Tango and Alpha Dog and Arcane Austin, now you've opened yourself up a lot more to criticisms directly from games media who previously had a line to you. You will get DMs being like, dude, what the hell? You are going, if you make yourself open to interviews after, people are going to ask you pointed questions. Like we saw with Sarah Bond in that really embarrassing interview she did with Bloomberg. Like, these things are going to happen. And if you start to retreat and close off, then it's going to be notable that you're retreating and being closed off. So it is a double-edged sword. And as much as we like criticize executives like Herman Hulst or Shintaro Furukawa for being very closed off, there's a reason they do it. So.
Yeah. Anyway, what I think we're going with all of this is that this is a company that is just extremely incoherent and in ways that are not always bad. Like, Microsoft was for a time like one of the best backwards compatibility people.
It still is.
Yeah. I only mean in the sense that like they slowed down and eventually stopped supporting new individually supporting additional games. But yes, unfortunately, Ace Combat 6 is disc only, so I might have to go scrounge up a used copy for that. But yeah, no, like, there's a lot of stuff about decisions they've made that are genuinely very positive. It's just frustrating that it's also coming with decisions that are very dangerous externally and dangerous internally.
Oh yeah, I think more so than closing, say, Lionhead back in the day, I think these are extremely consequential closures. Closing Tango, I think, will have repercussions for years to come, especially as the gaming market throughout Southeast Asia rises and has a lot of influence and connections with the Japanese market. Microsoft has essentially thrown away pretty much
that's
all of
what we
Asia.
talked about. The sweet spot for so long with Game Pass was the AA market, right? And like they have a studio primed for that, and
it's also their only Japanese studio.
Yeah.
It
was. I think everyone recognizes it as a very, very short-term decision that, like, any amount of long-term thinking would have caution them against.
And one thing I will say, like, I don't know exactly what was going on at the studio. I have no idea if they had, like, horrible, work ethic,
actually
extreme crunch or anything like that. So, barring any of that.
The rumors are that okay. So there are a few rumors about what was going on there. There are some rumors that there wasn't really certainty about who would be studio leadership, but then other people have contradicted that and said, no, Shinji Mikami really ensured that there were competent directors in place when he left, including John Johannes, who directed The Evil Within 2 and Hi-Fi Rush. So that wasn't a worry. It's not entirely clear, but I don't think it was because of internal concerns of the studio.
Also, I do want to mention, though, that about a month later, I think it was Booty, but one of the executives at Microsoft had an interview that I thought was really bad, where he basically implied that because the original leadership of Tango was gone, that's why. But that's like, No, of
No,
course
like,
not. Yeah.
and that's what kind of prompted that whole discourse, right? With other people pointing out, no, Mikami actually stayed longer at the studio than he intended, just to ensure that there was a succession plan. And like, of course, obviously, does like upper management really approve of that succession plan or not? We'll never know. But like, it does not seem that Booty was fully forthcoming about what was going on. All right, so this has been an interesting discussion about 7 out of 10 games and the current state of the games industry and unionization. Again, congratulations to the new union at Bethesda. We wish those workers all the best in their fight for better working conditions. If you would like to keep up to date with the podcast, you can follow us on our website at avocadogamescast.wordpress.com. On that website, we post each episode along with a link dump that fact checks all of our blathering. You can also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and as of a couple weeks ago, YouTube Music, because Google Podcasts no longer exists, and I put us up on YouTube Music, and I have to go fix some of the uploads because of the weird way in which archive.org handles audio files. Remind me to do that later this week, and get those missing episodes up on that playlist. All you have to do to find us on any of these podcast services is search for Avocado Gamescast. And if you would like to keep up with the community that spawned this podcast, The Avocado, you can check us out at the-avocado.org, where we talk about video games and movies and television and sports and occasionally the follies and foibles of Aaron Sorkin.
What was the PT up to? Like 10,000 comments today? Oof, man.
It's up on the second one. I think we're all very happy that we can just make fun of Aaron once again.
Yeah, so it's what we all needed right now. So
yeah, I mean, I'm surprised he didn't like write another character in his presidential fanfic that had 2 PhDs.
So it may be hard for the people to find this. So I'm just going to get this out of the way now that we're at the part of the podcast that no one's listening to. Hopefully not. This is good content. Hours before Biden dropped out, Sorkin wrote an op-ed for the New York Times explaining how he would end how he would script the end of the story to the 2024 American presidential election, which would end with Donald Trump being soundly defeated by the Democratic nominee, former Republican Governor Mitt Romney.
Which is
good old Willard Mitt Romney.
Fanfic of the highest order.
Yeah, you see, even Tetsuya Nomura wouldn't go this far.
Tetsuya Nomura would invent like a plucky, spiky-haired 36-year-old man,
Sora,
who would, essentially. Like Sora with the serial numbers fired off. He'd have a name like
Sora Jackson.
Sora Jackson, Sora Gold Key, something like that.
Oh my, yeah.
Versus like Xena Mert. I don't know what's Trump backwards.
It would be no. It would be like. It would have to be like an Organization 13 name, so he'd be up against like Zerp.
Or Gosh, Sora, I don't know about what we're gonna have with them open convention. Oh, Donald.
Pretty much. I mean, look, if Tetsuya Nomura could write op-eds for The Atlantic, I think the world would be a better place.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure he's a perfectly lovely man.
He just loves zippers a little too much.
Oh, and this is where I can tell him he's not responsible, or he's only partially responsible for Arendelle being bad.
Yeah, I guess it was because Disney was imposing a lot of restrictions.
No, it's that Disney, for reasons that I think are very fair, decided that the original creators of the modern movies should have more control. And in the case of Pixar, that meant to not making levels that are retellings of the world. And in the case of Arendelle was Elsa can't be a villain. Elsa can't be a party member. None of the characters are allowed to be party members. And you're not allowed to really interact with them.
That's idiotic.
Yeah.
They really like shortchanged those the creators of Kingdom Hearts. Should have let them just go wild, action figure style.
But that's it. No more Kingdom Hearts talk for the rest of the night.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, let's call this podcast to a close. Apologies to anyone who had to listen to us talk about Aaron Sorkin, or remind you that Aaron Sorkin exists. You can go back to your Sorkinless existence now. Sweet dreams, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
And keep in mind, when you have nothing to say, like I do right now, don't keep rambling. Just call it to a close.
Good night.
See you later.